Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity slows its pace, the lights dim just a little, and science is allowed to wander without needing to arrive anywhere in a hurry. This is a place for quiet thinking, for long explanations that don't rush toward conclusions, and for questions that don't demand immediate answers. Tonight we're going to turn our attention away from the sky and gently downward, toward a part of our world that has existed longer than forests, longer than bones, longer than eyes, and has managed to remain mostly untouched by us even now. Beneath the surface of the oceans, far below the reach of sunlight and waves, there is a realm that has barely noticed the passing of ages, a place where pressure replaces weather, where darkness is constant, and where time behaves differently, not in a mystical sense, but in a physical, biological one. This is the abyss. Not as a metaphor, not as a symbol of fear or mystery, but as a real, measurable environment that covers more of Earth than all continents combined. The central question guiding us tonight is a simple one, though the answer may not be. What prehistoric creatures might still be hiding in the abyss? Not legends, not sea monsters in the storybook sense, but animals whose designs trace back tens or hundreds of millions of years, creatures that resemble fossils more than modern life, forms that would look familiar to an ancient ocean but feel out of place to us, the kind of life that did not vanish when climates shifted, when continents moved, or when mass extinctions swept across the surface world, because it never lived at the surface in the first place. Before we continue, let me ask you something quietly, without urgency. Where are you listening from right now? Is it late where you are? Early? Somewhere in between? Are you winding down after a long day? Or easing into rest while the world outside has already gone quiet? However you arrived here, however much attention you plan to give, that's enough. This isn't a place that demands focus. It's a place that keeps talking whether you're listening closely or letting your thoughts drift. If you find this kind of slow exploration soothing, or if long, steady explanations help you relax, you're always welcome to like the video or subscribe. It helps this calm corner reach others who might enjoy the same pace. There's no rush to do it now. The abyss has waited hundreds of millions of years. It can wait a few seconds more. Now imagine standing at the edge of the known world, not geographically, but technologically. Picture everything humanity has built to explore the planet. Satellites mapping every continent, aircraft crossing oceans in hours, cameras placed on the surface of Mars, and then consider this. We have mapped the surface of the moon more completely than we have mapped the deep ocean floor of our own planet. Vast regions below the waves remain unseen, not because they are unreachable in principle, but because they are difficult, expensive, and hostile in ways we are still learning to manage. The deep ocean begins not far from shore. Once the continental shelf drops away, the descent is steady and relentless. Light fades quickly. Reds vanish first, then yellows, then greens, until only blue remains, and then even that disappears. By the time you reach depths measured in thousands of meters, sunlight is no longer part of the environment. There is no day or night. There are no seasons. Temperature changes little. The pressure, however, becomes immense, increasing with every meter, pressing in from all directions with a force that would crush most surface life instantly. This is not an environment that encourages rapid change. Energy is scarce. Food arrives slowly, drifting down from above as fragments of organic matter, dead plankton, discarded shells, the occasional whale fall that becomes an oasis for decades. In such a place, evolution does not reward speed, aggression, or constant reinvention. It rewards efficiency, stability, designs that work well enough to persist without modification. This is why the abyss is often described by biologists as a museum of ancient life, not because it contains literal fossils, but because it preserves living forms that resemble organisms thought to have vanished long ago. Creatures with body plans that date back to eras when life was still experimenting with shapes, strategies, and sensory systems. Animals that seem less like modern species and more like solutions arrived at early and then never discarded. When we talk about prehistoric creatures, we usually imagine land animals, dinosaurs, giant mammals, reptiles frozen in dramatic poses in museum halls. But the ocean tells a different story. Life began there, and for most of Earth's history, the sea was the dominant stage for evolution. Long before the first plant crept onto land, the oceans were already filled with complex ecosystems, predators, scavengers, filter feeders, and strange forms that no longer have surface equivalents. Many of those lineages never left the water, and some never left the depths. The abyss acts as a kind of biological archive. Extinction events that devastated surface ecosystems often had less impact far below. Asteroid impacts darkened skies and cooled climates, but the deep ocean does not rely on sunlight. Ice ages reshaped coastlines, but abyssal plains remained cold and dark as they always had been. Even dramatic shifts in atmospheric composition mattered little to organisms adapted to low oxygen and high pressure. As a result, the deep sea became a refuge, a place where ancient designs could persist while the surface world reinvented itself again and again. Over time, some of these organisms did change, but often slowly, subtly, retaining core features that link them directly to prehistoric ancestors. This leads to an uncomfortable but fascinating possibility. If conditions in the abyss favour stability, if exploration remains limited, and if our assumptions about extinction are based largely on surface evidence, then it is entirely reasonable to ask whether some forms we believe long gone might still exist, quietly, unnoticed, far below. Not enormous beasts roaming freely in the dark, but organisms that fit the rules of the deep, slow-moving, energy-efficient, rarely encountered, perhaps only visible to instruments or submersibles passing briefly through their territory, creatures whose populations are sparse, whose life cycles are long, and whose presence would be easy to miss in a place where we have spent so little time looking. It's worth remembering how often we've already been wrong. The coelacanth, a fish once thought extinct for 66 million years, was discovered alive in 1938, hauled up accidentally by a fishing trawler. It was not hidden in a mythic trench or an unexplored canyon. It was simply living where few people were looking, following patterns unchanged since before the rise of dinosaurs. The lesson there is not that surprises are guaranteed, but that absence of evidence in the ocean is not evidence of absence, especially in regions where direct observation remains rare. Even today, most deep-sea species are known from only a handful of specimens, some from a single encounter, others from partial remains, a tooth, a fragment of bone, a blurred image captured by a remotely operated vehicle whose lights briefly illuminated something unexpected before moving on. When you combine this with the immense scale of the deep ocean, it becomes clear how incomplete our picture really is. The abyss covers millions of square kilometres. Its average depth is greater than the height of most mountain ranges, and yet the total area of deep-sea floor directly observed by humans is vanishingly small, less than the area of a modest city. So as we continue tonight, we won't be chasing legends or indulging in fear. Instead, we'll look calmly at what the abyss is, how it functions, and why it may still shelter life that feels out of time. We'll examine known survivors, plausible candidates, and the biological rules that govern survival in eternal darkness. We'll also talk about why exploration remains limited, what kinds of evidence scientists look for, and how modern technology is slowly, carefully extending our reach downward. There's no need to imagine the abyss as hostile or threatening. It's indifferent. It has always been there, operating under conditions that rarely change, quietly shaping life that fits its constraints. The creatures that live there are not waiting to be discovered. They are simply living, unaware of our curiosity, following rhythms set long before humans learned to count years. As we descend further into this subject, the pace won't quicken. There will be no sudden reveals or dramatic endings. Each idea will connect to the next, the way layers of water connect as depth increases gradually, without clear boundaries. One environment gives way to another. One question leads naturally into the next. So allow your thoughts to slow. Let the surface world recede for a while. Above us, waves continue to break, ships continue to cross, and days continue to pass. Below, the abyss remains much as it has for ages, holding its quiet record of life that learned early how to endure. And that is where we begin. When people imagine unexplored places on Earth, they often picture dense jungles, polar ice, or distant mountain ranges. But the oldest and least touched realm on this planet is not found on land at all. It begins beneath the waves, past the familiar blue where sunlight still reaches, and continues downward into a world that has remained largely unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. This is the abyss, not as a dramatic label, but as a physical environment with clear boundaries, measurable conditions, and a history far older than any surface ecosystem we know. The abyssal zone generally begins around 4,000 meters below the ocean's surface and stretches down across vast plains of sediment that cover more than half of Earth's solid surface. Above it lies the bathyal zone, where some light still penetrates and slopes descend from continental margins. Below it, in certain regions, are the Hadal trenches, deep scars in the planet's crust that plunge even farther. Places like the Mariana Trench, where the seafloor drops to depths greater than Mount Everest is tall. But the abyss itself is not defined by extremes. It is defined by consistency. Temperatures in the abyss hover just above freezing, usually between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. They do not fluctuate with seasons. There are no storms, no waves, no tides in the way we understand them on the surface. The water is perpetually dark, perpetually cold, perpetually heavy. Pressure at these depths can exceed 400 times the pressure at sea level, enough to crush unprotected equipment instantly. And yet, despite these conditions, life exists there, adapted so thoroughly that the abyss is not hostile to it at all. It is home. What makes the abyss especially important for understanding prehistoric life is not just its depth, but its age. The deep ocean formed early in Earth's history, once the planet cooled enough for liquid water to remain stable. While continents shifted, collided, split apart and eroded, the abyssal plains accumulated layer upon layer of sediment, slowly recording geological time like a library that never closes. In some regions, the seafloor sediment has been undisturbed for tens of millions of years. Nothing burrows deeply, nothing erases the past quickly. Change happens, but at a pace so slow, it barely registers on a human scale. This stability is rare on Earth. On land, environments are constantly reshaped by weather, erosion, tectonic uplift, volcanic activity, and biological turnover. Forests burn, rivers change course, ice advances and retreats, entire habitats vanish and reappear elsewhere. The abyss does none of this. Once conditions settled into their current state, they remained remarkably consistent. Darkness never lifted, cold never eased, pressure never relented. For life, this meant that once a successful strategy emerged, there was little incentive to abandon it. That is one reason scientists often describe the abyss as conservative in evolutionary terms. Not stagnant, not frozen in time, but selective in a very specific way. Only traits that function efficiently under extreme pressure and limited energy persist. Wasteful complexity is discouraged. Rapid reproduction is rare. Many abyssal organisms grow slowly, mature late, and live far longer than their shallow water relatives. Some deep-sea fish may live for decades. Certain invertebrates may persist even longer. In a place where food arrives unpredictably, longevity becomes a survival advantage. Energy is the defining constraint of the abyss. Unlike surface ecosystems, which are driven by sunlight and photosynthesis, the abyss relies almost entirely on what falls from above. This slow rain of organic material, known as marine snow, consists of dead plankton, fecal pellets, mucus, and fragments of once living tissue. It drifts downward for weeks or months before reaching the sea floor, where it becomes the primary food source for countless organisms. Occasionally, something much larger arrives. The body of a whale sinks after death, creating a localized ecosystem known as a whale fall. These events can sustain life for decades, supporting bacteria, worms, crustaceans, and fish that specialize in exploiting this sudden abundance. But whale falls are rare. For most abyssal creatures, scarcity is the norm. Every adaptation reflects this reality. Because the abyss does not depend on sunlight, it was less affected by events that devastated surface life. When asteroid impacts blocked the sun and disrupted photosynthesis, deep-sea ecosystems continued largely unchanged. When ice ages locked up water in glaciers, abyssal temperatures remained stable. When oxygen levels in the atmosphere fluctuated, the deep ocean, already low in oxygen, barely noticed. This insulation from surface catastrophes is a key reason why ancient lineages were able to persist there long after disappearing elsewhere. Another factor that preserves ancient forms is isolation. The abyss is not a single connected plane in the way a continent is connected by land. It is divided by underwater mountain ranges, trenches, and currents that restrict movement. Populations can remain separated for millions of years, evolving slowly in parallel or not at all. Gene flow is limited. Speciation occurs, but often without dramatic changes in body plan. The result is a patchwork of life forms that look strikingly similar to ancient ancestors, even when genetically distinct. Human interaction with the abyss is minimal. Fishing rarely reaches these depths. Pollution is reduced, though not absent. Noise travels far in water, but the abyss remains quieter than shallower zones. Until the mid-20th century, humans had no direct access to these regions at all. Knowledge came from nets dragged blindly across the seafloor, or from fragments brought up accidentally. Only with the development of deep-sea submersibles and remotely operated vehicles did direct observation become possible. Even now, access is limited. Deep-sea expeditions are expensive, technically demanding, and risky. A single dive may take hours to descend, a short window to observe, and hours to return. Lights illuminate only a small cone of water. Cameras capture brief glimpses of organisms that may never be seen again. Entire expeditions may pass without encountering anything unexpected simply because the abyss is vast and life there is sparse. This scarcity of observation creates a perception problem. From a human perspective, the abyss feels empty. But emptiness in the deep ocean does not mean absence, it means low density. Life exists, but spread thinly across enormous distances. A creature might occupy a territory larger than a city, encountering few others of its kind. Such distributions make detection difficult. It is entirely possible for large or unusual organisms to exist without leaving frequent evidence of their presence. The geological calm of the abyss also plays a role in preservation. On land, fossils are exposed, eroded, destroyed, or buried by shifting sediments. In the deep sea, once an organism is buried, it may remain undisturbed for millions of years. This has allowed scientists to reconstruct ancient marine ecosystems with remarkable detail, but it also means that the line between fossil and living form can blur. When a modern organism closely resembles a fossil species, it raises questions about how much has truly changed. Importantly, the abyss is not uniform. While conditions are broadly consistent, subtle gradients exist. Variations in current strength, sediment type, chemical composition, and proximity to food sources create microhabitats. Hydrothermal vents introduce entirely different energy systems based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. Cold seeps release methane and hydrogen sulfide, supporting unique communities. These pockets of chemical energy may serve as refuges for specialized organisms, including lineages with very ancient origins. From an evolutionary perspective, the abyss is less a graveyard and more a shelter. It does not actively preserve creatures for our discovery. It simply does not force them to change. Surface environments are noisy, variable, and competitive. The abyss is quiet, stable, and selective in a narrow way. If a body plan works, there is little pressure to reinvent it. If an organism can survive on minimal energy, tolerate crushing pressure, and reproduce slowly, it can persist for geological timespans. This challenges the way we think about extinction. Extinction is often framed as an absolute end, a clean disappearance. In reality, extinction is often regional. A lineage may vanish from shallow waters but persist in the depths. It may disappear from one ocean basin but survive in another. The abyss complicates our assumptions because it is so poorly sampled. What we do not see, we tend to assume is gone. The idea that the abyss is Earth's least touched realm is not just poetic, it is quantifiable. More humans have walked on the moon than have visited the abyssal plain in person. Entire mountain ranges beneath the sea remain unnamed. Trenches have been mapped only in outline. Vast stretches of seafloor have never been visually surveyed. When modern expeditions descend, they often encounter species completely new to science, organisms that have likely existed unnoticed for millions of years. This context matters when we begin asking whether prehistoric creatures might still hide in the abyss. The question is not whether dramatic monsters roam freely, but whether ancient designs, once common in prehistoric oceans, might persist in small populations under conditions that favour survival over visibility. To understand that possibility, we must first understand the abyss not as a place of mystery, but as a place of continuity. The deep ocean is not frozen in the past, but it is slow to forget it. Its rhythms are measured in millennia, not days. Its changes are subtle, not abrupt. Life there adapts cautiously, conserving what works. In such a realm, the boundary between ancient and modern becomes less clear. A creature that looks prehistoric is not an anomaly. It is a logical outcome of an environment that rewards endurance. As we move forward, attention will naturally shift from the place itself to the life it supports, from the physical rules of the abyss to the organisms shaped by those rules. The next step is to examine how some creatures manage to outlast extinction events that erase their relatives elsewhere, and what it means when living animals resemble fossils more closely than modern species. The abyss sets the stage. What survives there follows its lead. The phrase living fossil tends to carry a certain weight. It suggests something out of place, a relic that somehow slipped through the cracks of extinction and wandered into the modern world unchanged. But in biology, the idea is less about being frozen in time and more about persistence. A living fossil is not a creature that stopped evolving. It is a creature whose basic design proved so effective that radical change was never necessary. In environments like the abyss, where stability is the rule rather than the exception, such designs can endure for spans of time that feel almost unreasonable by human standards. To understand why some creatures refuse to go extinct, it helps to reconsider what extinction usually means. Most species disappear not because they fail outright, but because the conditions that once supported them vanish. Climate shifts, competitors arrive, food sources change, predators evolve new strategies. On the surface of the planet, these pressures arrive frequently and often violently. In the deep ocean, many of them never arrive at all. When biologists refer to living fossils, they are often pointing to organisms whose closest known relatives appear primarily in the fossil record, sometimes tens or hundreds of millions of years old. These creatures may show only modest changes in body plan over immense spans of geological time. Their internal chemistry may have adapted, their genetics may have drifted, but externally they resemble their ancient ancestors closely enough that paleontologists can place them side by side with fossils and recognize the continuity almost immediately. One of the most well-known examples is the coelacanth, For decades, it existed only as stone impressions embedded in ancient rock, dated to the late Cretaceous period. Scientists believed it vanished alongside the dinosaurs around 66 million years ago. Then, in 1938, a living specimen was hauled from the depths near South Africa. Very much alive, very much real, and entirely unconcerned with its presumed extinction. The coelacanth's body plan is strikingly archaic. Its lobed fins resemble early experiments in limb-like structures, hinting at the evolutionary path that eventually led some fish onto land. Its skull opens with a hinged joint, unknown in most modern fish. Its swim bladder is filled with fat rather than gas, adaptations suited for deep water. It is slow-moving, nocturnal, and energy-efficient. In short, it fits the abyss perfectly. What allowed the coelacanth to survive while its relatives vanished was not luck. It was location. By occupying deep, stable habitats along steep underwater slopes, it avoided many of the environmental disruptions that reshaped shallow seas. Its lifestyle required little change. Its prey remained available, its predators remained limited. There was no evolutionary arms race demanding innovation. The design worked, so it stayed. Another often cited example is the horseshoe crab, a creature that looks less like a modern animal and more like something assembled from spare parts of prehistoric armour. Horseshoe crabs predate dinosaurs by hundreds of millions of years. Fossils resembling modern horseshoe crabs appear in rocks over 400 million years old. While they are not abyssal creatures in the strictest sense, their persistence illustrates the same principle. A body plan optimized for survival in a specific niche can remain viable across vast stretches of time. In the deeper ocean, similar persistence appears again and again. The Nautilus, with its external shell divided into gas-filled chambers, belongs to a lineage that once dominated prehistoric seas. Ammonites, their spiral-shelled relatives, vanished in the same extinction that eliminated non-avian dinosaurs. Nautiluses survived, likely because they occupied deeper habitats less affected by surface disruptions. Their slow metabolism, simple nervous systems, and efficient buoyancy control allowed them to persist while more specialized relatives disappeared. Sharks offer another window into this pattern. The goblin shark, with its elongated snout and protrusible jaws, resembles fossil sharks far more than it resembles the streamlined predators familiar from coastal waters. Its lineage stretches back over 100 million years. The frilled shark looks even more ancient, with eel-like proportions, 6 gill slits instead of the usual 5, and teeth arranged for gripping rather than slicing. Fossils nearly identical to modern frilled sharks appear in Jurassic rocks. These sharks are not fast. They do not chase prey over long distances. They wait. They conserve energy. When an opportunity presents itself, they strike with sudden efficiency. This strategy, combined with life in deep water where competition is sparse, has allowed them to endure while many faster, flashier shark lineages rose and fell. The idea of a living fossil can be misleading if interpreted too literally. These creatures are not carbon copies of their ancestors. Genetic studies show that they have continued to evolve. Their proteins have adapted. Their physiology has fine-tuned itself to local conditions. What has remained consistent is the overall architecture. The blueprint was good enough early on, and nothing about the abyss demanded it be replaced. The deep sea is particularly good at preserving such blueprints because it reduces selective pressure for novelty. On land and in shallow waters, innovation can mean survival. New predators force prey to change. New plants alter food webs. New climates demand new strategies. In the abyss, the rules are simple and unforgiving. Survive on little, move slowly, waste nothing, reproduce carefully. If you can do that, the abyss will let you stay. This is why the fossil record of deep-sea organisms often shows long periods of morphological stability. Species appear, persist with little visible change, and eventually disappear, often not because they failed, but because conditions finally shifted beyond tolerance. Until then, they remain, quietly, unnoticed. It is also why discoveries of living fossils often feel accidental. The coelacanth was not found during a targeted search. It was caught by chance. Goblin sharks surface rarely, usually damaged by fishing gear that reached deeper than intended. Frilled sharks appear sporadically, often sick or dying when brought up too quickly. Their habitats remain largely inaccessible, and their populations sparse. This scarcity feeds speculation. If we have already missed such obvious survivors for so long, what else might exist beyond our limited reach? Not giant beasts roaming freely, but creatures whose size, behaviour and rarity keep them hidden. Animals that resemble prehistoric forms not because they are ancient individuals, but because their lineages never needed to abandon an effective design. Living fossils also challenge our emotional understanding of extinction. We tend to think of extinction as final and absolute, but the deep ocean complicates that narrative. Lineages may retreat rather than vanish. They may persist in refuges while disappearing elsewhere. From a surface perspective, they appear gone. From a planetary perspective, they remain. This perspective is reinforced every time a new deep-sea species is described. Many of these organisms defy easy classification. Some resemble known groups but with archaic features. Others appear so distinct that they seem to belong to entirely separate branches of the tree of life. In some cases, genetic analysis reveals lineages that split from known relatives hundreds of millions of years ago, quietly evolving in isolation ever since. The term living fossil, then, is less about age and more about context. These creatures are not ancient because time stopped for them. They are ancient because time did not force them to change quickly. The abyss provided a buffer against chaos. It allowed survival to be measured in patience rather than speed. Understanding this helps ground discussions about prehistoric creatures in reality. The deep ocean does not hide impossibilities. It hides probabilities. It hides organisms that fit its constraints so well that they can endure almost indefinitely. It hides life forms whose ancestors once shared the oceans with creatures long gone from the surface world. As exploration slowly increases, the list of known living fossils continues to grow. Each new discovery refines our understanding of what persistence looks like. It is rarely dramatic. It is often quiet, subtle, and deeply logical. The next question, then, is not whether such creatures exist, because we already know they do. The question becomes why the abyss is so effective at preserving them. What is it about pressure, darkness, and scarcity that turns the deep ocean into a refuge for ancient life? To answer that, attention naturally shifts from the organisms themselves to the forces acting upon them. Forces that shape not just survival, but the very pace at which evolution unfolds. And that leads directly into the deeper mechanics of the abyss, where time presses differently and change learns to move slowly. Pressure is one of those forces that is easy to underestimate because we rarely feel it change. At the surface of the ocean, it presses on us gently and invisibly, balanced perfectly by the pressure inside our own bodies. We live our lives unaware of it, moving through air that cushions us from its weight, but descend into the deep ocean, and pressure stops being a background condition and becomes the dominant rule that governs everything else. It shapes bodies, behaviours, chemistry, and ultimately survival itself. More than cold, more than darkness, pressure is the reason the deep preserves the past. Every 10 metres you descend beneath the sea surface, pressure increases by roughly 1 atmosphere. By the time you reach 1,000 metres, the pressure is about 100 times greater than at sea level. At 4,000 metres, within the abyssal zone, it reaches 400 atmospheres. That means every square centimetre of an organism's body is supporting the weight of several tons of water. To exist here at all requires extreme specialisation. To thrive requires surrendering many of the features that surface life takes for granted. Pressure does not merely squeeze. It interferes with chemistry. It alters how proteins fold. It affects how membranes function. It changes the behavior of enzymes and the way molecules interact. For surface organisms, sudden exposure to abyssal pressure is fatal, not because they are crushed outright, but because their biological systems simply stop working. Proteins misfold, cell membranes lose integrity, neural signals fail, life at a molecular level unravels. But for organisms that evolved under these conditions, pressure is not an enemy, it is a constant. Their proteins are structured to function only under extreme compression. Their cell membranes are composed of lipids that remain flexible rather than rigid. Their enzymes operate efficiently at pressures that would render surface biochemistry inert. Remove them from this environment, and the opposite problem occurs. They fall apart not because pressure is added, but because it is removed. This creates one of the most important barriers between the deep ocean and the rest of the planet. Pressure isolates. It limits migration. It prevents shallow water species from invading abyssal habitats, and it prevents deep sea organisms from easily moving upward. Evolutionary traffic is restricted. Gene flow slows. Change becomes localized and incremental. This isolation is a key reason why the deep ocean preserves ancient forms. On land and in shallow seas, new species constantly arrive, bringing competition, predation, and novel strategies. In the abyss, innovation spreads slowly, if at all. Once a lineage adapts successfully to high pressure, it occupies a niche that few others can enter. There is little incentive to change a design that already works in such an unforgiving environment. Pressure also suppresses speed. High-pressure environments favour soft bodies, reduce skeletons and slow movements. Rapid motion requires energy, and energy is scarce in the deep. Fast predators need frequent meals. Fast prey need constant vigilance. Both are difficult to sustain when food arrives unpredictably and in small quantities. As a result, many abyssal organisms move deliberately, conserving energy, relying on ambush or passive feeding rather than pursuit. This slowness extends beyond movement. Growth rates are often extremely low. Reproduction may occur infrequently. Lifespans stretch long compared to surface counterparts. When generations turn over slowly, evolution itself slows. Mutations still occur, selection still acts, but the pace of visible change diminishes. Body plans remain stable not because evolution stopped, but because the conditions reward consistency over experimentation. Pressure also affects physical structure in ways that echo prehistoric life. Hard air-filled cavities are liabilities in the deep. Gas compresses. Structures collapse. This is one reason why many deep-sea organisms lack swim bladders, lungs, or rigid shells. Instead, they rely on oils, gels, or flexible tissues to maintain buoyancy and shape. These traits resemble some of the earliest marine organisms, which evolved before complex skeletal systems became common. In this sense, the abyss does not just preserve ancient lineages, it favours ancient solutions. Early life evolved in a world without hard skeletons, without rapid movement, without high-energy lifestyles. The deep ocean recreates aspects of those early conditions. Darkness, cold, pressure, limited resources. It is not a perfect replica of prehistoric seas, but it is closer to them than most modern environments. This similarity allows organisms with ancient traits to remain viable. A soft-bodied animal that would be outcompeted in shallow waters may do perfectly well in the abyss. A predator with a simple hunting strategy may thrive where prey is scarce but predictable. A scavenger with minimal energy requirements may outlast more complex competitors. Over time, these advantages accumulate, reinforcing the persistence of certain forms. Pressure also discourages large-scale ecological disruptions. Storms do not reach the abyss. Waves dissipate long before they approach these depths. Temperature remains stable. Chemical composition changes slowly. Even tectonic activity, while present, rarely causes widespread disturbance across abyssal plains. The environment is not static, but it is buffered against rapid change. This buffering effect is crucial when considering mass extinctions. Many of the planet's great die-offs were triggered by rapid environmental shifts, sudden cooling or warming, ocean acidification, loss of oxygen, collapse of food chains driven by sunlight. The abyss, insulated from surface dynamics, experienced these events differently. While not immune, it often remained habitable when other environments became hostile. During periods when shallow seas became hypoxic, deep-sea organisms already adapted to low oxygen were less affected. When surface productivity collapsed, marine snow still continued, albeit reduced. When temperature gradients shifted, abyssal temperatures barely changed. As a result, lineages that vanished elsewhere found refuge below. Pressure also influences sensory evolution. In darkness, vision becomes less important. Eyes may reduce or disappear entirely. Other senses take precedence: chemical detection, vibration sensing, electrical fields. These alternative sensory systems tend to be simpler and more conserved than complex visual systems, which evolve rapidly in response to light and colour. Reduced sensory complexity further stabilizes body plans over time. There is also a mechanical aspect to pressure that influences fossilization and preservation. High pressure slows decay. Cold temperatures reduce bacterial activity. Low oxygen inhibits many decomposers. When organisms die in the deep sea, their remains may persist longer before breaking down. Some are buried quickly by fine sediments, sealing them away. This creates an unusually continuous fossil record for certain abyssal environments, allowing scientists to trace lineages across vast spans of time with minimal gaps. But pressure's role is not just preservational, it actively shapes what kinds of life can exist. Any mutation that compromises pressure tolerance is likely fatal. This creates a narrow evolutionary corridor. Variations that would be harmless or even beneficial in other environments are eliminated here. The result is a population tightly tuned to its conditions, resistant to drift. This resistance extends to invasions. When new species evolve elsewhere, they cannot easily colonize the abyss unless they pass through intermediate depths and gradually adapt to increasing pressure. This takes time. Many fail. Those that succeed do so slowly, often retaining features of their shallow water ancestors for long periods. Once established, they too become subject to the same stabilizing forces. Over millions of years, this process creates a kind of evolutionary archive. Not a museum where specimens are frozen, but a library where certain chapters remain open while others are rewritten elsewhere. The abyss does not demand novelty. It tolerates it only if it does not disrupt the delicate balance required to function under pressure. From a human perspective, this can feel eerie. We are accustomed to environments that change rapidly and reward adaptability. The abyss operates on a different schedule. Its challenges are absolute rather than variable. Either you can survive the pressure or you cannot. There is little middle ground. Once that threshold is crossed, survival becomes a matter of patience rather than innovation. This has implications for how we think about prehistoric creatures. If a lineage evolved pressure tolerance early, or gradually retreated to deeper waters as surface conditions changed, it may have found a long-term refuge. Its descendants may look remarkably similar to their ancestors, because the rules governing their survival never changed enough to demand transformation. It also means that absence of evidence is especially misleading here. A creature adapted to deep pressure may leave few traces at the surface. Its remains may never wash ashore. Its population density may be low. Its encounters with human technology rare. The deep does not advertise its inhabitants, it conceals them by default. Pressure, then, is not just a physical force, it is a filter, a gatekeeper that restricts access, slows change, and rewards endurance. It compresses time in an evolutionary sense, stretching moments of stability across epochs. It turns survival into a long-term commitment rather than a race. As we continue, it becomes clear that pressure alone does not explain everything. Other factors reinforce this preservation. Darkness eliminates visual arms races. Cold reduces metabolic demands. Scarcity enforces efficiency. Together, these forces create an environment where ancient designs are not liabilities but assets. The deep ocean does not preserve the past because it wants to. It does so because its conditions make forgetting difficult. Evolution still works there, but it works quietly, trimming excess rather than reinventing form. In such a place, the line between ancient and modern blurs, and the question shifts from why some creatures survive to how many others may still persist, unnoticed, in the crushing calm below. And once pressure has done its work, shaping what can exist at all, other forces step in to determine what grows large, what remains small, and what shapes cast shadows even in the dark. When humans speak about giant creatures in the deep ocean, the conversation often slips quickly into myth. Sea serpents, monsters, shapes half seen and exaggerated by fear or imagination. But beneath that layer of storytelling, there is a quieter, more uncomfortable truth. Some of the largest animals ever known on Earth did not live on land. They lived in the ocean, and some of the largest animals alive today still do. The deep sea does not forbid size. In some ways, it allows it. Reports of colossal forms emerging from the darkness are not new. Sailors have been describing enormous shapes beneath their ships for centuries. Shadows moving beneath the hull, tentacles rising briefly from the water, immense bodies brushing against keels before vanishing again. For a long time, these accounts were dismissed as exaggeration, alcohol-fueled storytelling, or simple misidentification of waves, whales, or floating debris. That skepticism was reasonable, but it became harder to maintain once science began confirming that at least some of these reports were grounded in reality. One of the most famous examples is the giant squid. For most of scientific history, the giant squid was known only from carcasses washed ashore and from scars found on the bodies of sperm whales. Circular marks, sometimes more than 20 centimetres across, left by suction cups armed with serrated rings. These scars were not superficial. They were embedded deep into muscle and blubber, evidence of violent encounters far below the surface. For years, no one had seen a living giant squid in its natural habitat. Illustrations were speculative. Sizes were debated. Some estimates bordered on fantasy. And yet, the physical evidence kept accumulating. Beaks recovered from whale stomachs, tentacle fragments hauled up in nets, eyes the size of dinner plates preserved in jars. Slowly, the picture sharpened. When living giant squids were finally filmed in the early 21st century, they were not rampaging monsters. They were calm, deliberate animals moving through the dark with slow, controlled motions. Their size was still extraordinary. Lengths exceeding 10 metres, bodies built for ambush rather than speed. Massive eyes adapted to detect faint glows in the darkness. They were not mythological exaggerations. If anything, the reality was more unsettling because it was quieter. Then there is the colossal squid, a creature even larger and heavier than the giant squid, though far less well understood. Known mostly from fragments and a handful of specimens, the colossal squid possesses thicker tentacles, swivelling hooks instead of simple suction cups, and a bulk that suggests an entirely different approach to predation. Where the giant squid is long and flexible, the colossal squid is dense and muscular, built to wrestle rather than ensnare. What is striking about both of these animals is not just their size, but their lineage. Squids and their relatives trace their origins back hundreds of millions of years. Long before fish dominated the seas, cephalopods were already experimenting with size, intelligence, and predation. Some prehistoric cephalopods possessed external shells and reached lengths rivaling modern whales. Over time, shells were lost, bodies softened, and new strategies emerged. But the tendency toward large size never disappeared entirely. The deep ocean provides conditions where such size can be advantageous. Cold temperatures slow metabolism. Scarcity of food favours animals that can go long periods between meals. Large bodies store energy efficiently. Pressure supports mass, reducing the structural challenges that gravity imposes on land animals. In water, size does not carry the same penalties it does on land. This is why the largest animals to ever exist are marine. Blue whales dwarf even the largest dinosaurs, but whales are surface breathers, dependent on sunlight-driven food chains. In the deep, size takes on a different character. It is less about constant feeding and more about endurance. A large deep-sea predator may eat rarely, but when it does, the meal must be worth the wait. Beyond squids, there are other reports of enormous forms, though these are less well documented. Deep-sea fish of unexpected length, eel-like bodies thicker than oil drums, shapes detected by sonar that do not match known species. In some cases, these reports can be explained by known animals behaving in unfamiliar ways. In others, the data is simply too limited to draw conclusions. Sonar, for all its usefulness, is an imperfect tool. It detects reflections of sound, not images. Large, soft-bodied organisms may produce ambiguous signatures. Schools of smaller animals can appear as a single mass. Equipment glitches and signal interference are common, and yet there are instances where repeated detections suggest something more persistent. One reason such animals remain elusive is behavioural. Many deep-sea giants are thought to inhabit the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones, migrating vertically rather than horizontally. They may spend daylight hours at extreme depths, ascending only at night to feed. This vertical migration reduces encounters with surface vessels and fishing gear. It also places them in regions where exploration is sparse. Another factor is population density. Large animals require space. In environments with limited food, they cannot exist in large numbers. A handful of individuals spread across thousands of square kilometres could easily evade detection for decades, even centuries. The ocean is not just deep, it is wide beyond comprehension. There is also the question of growth. Some deep-sea organisms grow continuously throughout their lives. Unlike mammals, which reach a fixed adult size, many fish and invertebrates keep growing as long as they live. In environments where lifespan is extended and mortality is low, this can result in individuals far larger than average. A rare, exceptionally old specimen might appear monstrous compared to typical members of its species. This phenomenon complicates reports from fishermen and submersible pilots. An unusually large individual of a known species can look entirely unfamiliar. Without context, without scale references, size alone can create the impression of something new, something prehistoric, something that should not exist anymore. And yet there are cases where size is not the only anomaly. Some reported creatures exhibit combinations of features that do not align neatly with known species. Elongated bodies with fin arrangements reminiscent of ancient fish. Jaw structures that resemble fossil lineages rather than modern forms. Movements that appear inefficient by surface standards, but make sense in a low-energy environment. It is here that speculation begins to overlap with biology, not in the sense of fantasy, but in the sense of unanswered questions. If the abyss preserves ancient designs, and if size can be an advantage under certain conditions, then it is not unreasonable to ask whether some lineages once thought extinct might persist as rare, deep-dwelling giants. This does not mean dinosaurs swimming through trenches. That idea collapses under scrutiny. Dinosaurs were primarily terrestrial and required conditions incompatible with deep-sea life. But other prehistoric marine reptiles, large fish, and invertebrates occupied ecological roles that could, in theory, be replicated in the deep ocean. The fossil record shows numerous examples of large-bodied marine predators that vanished from shallow seas. Their disappearance does not guarantee total extinction. However, evidence matters. Science does not advance on shadows alone. For every intriguing report, there are dozens that resolve into known explanations. Giant squids were once dismissed because no one had seen them alive. Now they are accepted because physical evidence accumulated. The same standard applies to any claim of unknown giants. What complicates this is that deep-sea exploration is inherently selective. Cameras are small, lights are limited. Most vehicles follow predetermined paths. They do not wander aimlessly. They observe what happens to cross their field of view, which is tiny compared to the environment. An animal that avoids light or sound, or that inhabits depths beyond routine exploration, could remain unseen indefinitely. There is also the matter of behaviour under observation. Many deep-sea creatures react strongly to artificial light. Some flee, others freeze. Some may avoid illuminated areas entirely. If a large organism evolved to minimise energy expenditure and avoid unnecessary risks, it might simply remain outside the reach of our instruments. Historical accounts provide additional context. Sailors' logs from the age of exploration frequently describe encounters with enormous animals. While many of these accounts are unreliable, some include details that align with what we now know about giant squids and large sharks. Tentacles described as pale and flexible, bodies that remained mostly submerged, movements that were slow rather than aggressive. The infamous kraken, for example, was likely an exaggerated interpretation of giant squid encounters. Once the animal was confirmed, the myth lost its mystery but not its scale. Reality proved large enough. This pattern suggests caution rather than dismissal. When humans encounter unfamiliar life in environments they barely understand, description precedes explanation. Only later does context catch up. The deep ocean, with its limited visibility and extreme conditions, amplifies this effect. It is also worth considering that size itself may be a misleading metric. Some prehistoric creatures were not enormous, but they appear so in the deep because scale references are absent. A fish 2 meters long can seem colossal when emerging from darkness next to a small submersible. Human perception struggles in environments without familiar landmarks. Nevertheless, confirmed deep-sea giants demonstrate that the abyss does not impose an upper size limit in the way land does. It reshapes what size means. Buoyancy offsets mass. Pressure supports structure. Cold preserves tissue. Scarcity favours storage. Under these conditions, ancient tendencies toward gigantism can re-emerge. The idea of giant shadows in the deep, then, is not about fear. It is about humility, about recognizing how little of this environment we have seen, about acknowledging that our mental picture of Earth is shaped almost entirely by surface experience. Below that, the rules change. As exploration continues, new technologies are expanding our reach. Longer-lasting submersibles, autonomous vehicles capable of roaming for months, better low-light cameras, improved sonar resolution. Each advancement reveals more detail, but also more questions. The deeper we look, the more we realise how incomplete our understanding remains. Some discoveries will undoubtedly demystify old reports, others may complicate them, and a few may confirm that some shadows were not exaggerations at all, but brief glimpses of animals that operate on timescales and territories far beyond our routine observation. Large size in the abyss is not an accident, it is a strategy, one that has worked before, one that still works now, and one that hints at the kinds of predators, scavengers, and survivors that may still move slowly through the dark, leaving behind little more than scars, fragments, and stories. As attention shifts from sheer size to behaviour and design, another pattern emerges. Many of the deep's most effective hunters are not fast or aggressive. They are ancient in posture and method, relying on patience rather than pursuit. That quiet efficiency opens the door to understanding how prehistoric predators might persist without drawing attention, blending seamlessly into the rules of the abyss. In the deep ocean, hunting does not look the way it does near the surface. There are no long chases, no bursts of speed across open water, no elaborate displays meant to intimidate or impress. Energy is too scarce for that. Light is too limited. Distance is too uncertain. Instead, predation in the abyss favours designs that feel old, not because they are outdated, but because they were refined early and never stopped working. Many of the predators that rule the deep would look strangely familiar if placed beside fossils from prehistoric seas. Their bodies follow simple lines. Their jaws are built for gripping rather than slicing. Their movements are slow, deliberate and economical. These are not animals shaped by modern competition. They are shaped by endurance, patience and the ability to wait without wasting effort. One of the most striking examples is the frilled shark. At first glance, it barely resembles the streamlined sharks most people recognise. Its body is long and eel-like, its head is narrow, its mouth opens wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth, arranged not in flat rows, but in backward-facing tridents designed to prevent escape once prey is caught. Fossils of sharks nearly identical to the frilled shark date back to the Jurassic period, over 150 million years ago. The frilled shark's hunting strategy reflects this ancient lineage. It does not chase, it waits. Coiled loosely in the water or drifting slowly near the seafloor, it relies on stealth and proximity. When prey comes close enough, the shark lunges forward with a sudden, snake-like motion, engulfing its target whole. There is no wasted motion, no prolonged struggle, just a brief release of stored energy and then stillness once again. This strategy makes sense in a world where meals may be separated by long intervals. Speed is less valuable than certainty. A failed chase wastes energy that may not be recovered for weeks. An ambush, even if rare, offers a higher return. The frilled shark's design reflects this logic perfectly, and it is the same logic that guided many prehistoric marine predators long before modern sharks evolved their sleeker forms. Another deep-sea predator with an unmistakably ancient design is the goblin shark. Its elongated snout, flattened head, and pale, almost translucent skin give it an appearance that feels unfinished by modern standards. But its most remarkable feature is its jaw. The goblin shark can project its jaws forward with astonishing speed, extending them far beyond the skull to snatch prey, before retracting them just as quickly. This protrusible jaw mechanism is not unique to goblin sharks, but in them it is exaggerated to an extreme. It allows the shark to capture prey without closing distance, an advantage in dark environments where prey detection may occur only at very close range. The goblin shark does not rely on pursuit. It relies on surprise and mechanics. Fossil evidence suggests that this lineage diverged early from other sharks, retaining traits that were common in ancient forms, but later abandoned by faster, more active hunters. In the abyss, those abandoned traits remain valuable. A flexible jaw, a sensitive electroreceptive snout, a slow metabolism. Together they form a hunting system that works quietly and efficiently in darkness. Deep-sea bony fish show similar patterns. The viperfish, with its elongated body and oversized fangs, looks less like a modern fish and more like an illustration pulled from an ancient bestiary. Its teeth are so long they do not fit inside its mouth. Instead, grooves in the skull allow them to rest alongside the head when the mouth is closed. This arrangement allows the fish to impale prey larger than itself, a useful adaptation in an environment where any meal is valuable. The viperfish's body plan is not built for speed. Its muscles are relatively weak. Its movements are measured, but its teeth are efficient and its jaws open wide. Once prey is caught, escape is nearly impossible. This kind of design appears again and again in prehistoric marine fossils. Large mouths, prominent teeth, minimal emphasis on sustained motion. Anglerfish represent another ancient approach to predation. While their appearance is bizarre by surface standards, their strategy is elegantly simple. A modified dorsal spine extends forward over the mouth, tipped with a bioluminescent lure. In total darkness, this small point of light becomes irresistible. Curious animals approach. The anglerfish waits. When prey is close enough, the jaws snap shut. The anglerfish's hunting method relies on deception rather than pursuit. It requires patience rather than speed, and it depends on a sensory environment where light is rare enough to be compelling. Fossil records show that early fish experimented with similar ambush-based strategies, using structural features to draw prey within reach. Bioluminescence is a modern refinement, but the underlying concept is ancient. Some deep-sea predators blur the line between fish and something more primitive. The sleeper sharks, including the Greenland shark, move with an almost unsettling slowness. Their metabolism is among the slowest recorded for any vertebrate. Radiocarbon dating suggests some individuals may live for centuries. Their tissues accumulate toxins, making them unpalatable to many predators, allowing them to persist with little interference. While the Greenland shark inhabits cold surface and deep waters rather than the abyssal plain itself, its design illustrates how slowness and longevity can replace speed and aggression as dominant survival strategies. Fossil sharks with similar body proportions appear throughout the geological record, suggesting that this approach has been viable for a very long time. What unites these predators is not their taxonomy, but their philosophy of hunting. They do not dominate by force, they dominate by efficiency. They are built to endure conditions where mistakes are costly and opportunities are rare. This philosophy mirrors that of prehistoric oceans, where ecosystems were less crowded and competition unfolded over long timescales. In ancient seas, before the rise of fast-swimming teleost fish and agile marine mammals, many predators relied on ambush and grip. Speed was less important when prey density was low and energy budgets were tight. The deep ocean preserves those conditions. It recreates, in many ways, the ecological pressures of early marine life. This is why so many deep-sea predators appear archaic, not because they failed to modernize, but because modernization was unnecessary. In fact, many modern traits would be liabilities. Streamlining for speed requires muscle mass and energy intake that the abyss cannot reliably provide. Complex social behaviors require frequent interaction, which sparse populations do not allow. Elaborate visual displays require light, which does not exist. Ancient designs solve these problems elegantly. A large mouth does not require speed. Teeth do not require frequent use. Sensory systems tuned to vibration and electricity work in darkness. Flexible skeletons tolerate pressure. Soft tissues compress without damage. Every feature reflects a compromise that favours survival over spectacle. This has important implications when considering prehistoric predators thought to be extinct. Many large marine reptiles of the Mesozoic era, such as plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, relied on air-breathing and high-energy swimming. These traits are incompatible with abyssal life, but not all prehistoric marine predators fit that mould. Some early fish and invertebrates occupied ecological roles that resemble those of modern deep-sea hunters. The fossil record includes numerous examples of slow-moving, ambush-oriented predators with elongated bodies and large mouths. Many disappeared from shallow seas as faster, more competitive species evolved. But disappearance from shallow environments does not automatically imply extinction everywhere. Retreat into deeper waters is a plausible alternative, especially during periods of environmental upheaval. The deep ocean also favours sensory conservatism. Vision is expensive. Maintaining eyes requires constant energy. In darkness, eyes lose value. Many deep-sea predators have reduced eyes, or eyes specialised for detecting faint light rather than forming detailed images. This mirrors early vertebrate evolution, when vision was limited and other senses dominated. Electroreception, for example, is an ancient sense. Sharks and rays detect electrical fields generated by muscle contractions. This ability predates complex vision and works regardless of light conditions. In the abyss, it becomes one of the most reliable ways to locate prey. Fossil evidence suggests that early jawed fish already possessed rudimentary electroreceptive abilities, The deep ocean rewards the retention of such traits. Another factor reinforcing ancient designs is reproductive strategy. Many deep-sea predators produce relatively few offspring. Some give birth to live young, others release eggs that develop slowly. High parental investment and low reproductive rates reduce population turnover. With fewer generations per unit time, evolutionary change slows. Traits persist. This does not mean deep-sea predators are immune to extinction. They are vulnerable to disturbances, especially those caused by human activity such as deep-sea fishing, mining and pollution. But their baseline state is one of persistence. When left undisturbed, they can occupy the same ecological roles for millions of years. Encounters with these predators often feel unsettling not because they are aggressive, but because they defy our expectations. A shark that does not rush. A fish that does not flee. A creature that seems indifferent to presence. These behaviours are not signs of stupidity or weakness. They are signs of a world where urgency is unnecessary. Reports from submersible pilots often describe deep-sea predators as ghostly. They appear suddenly in the cone of light, hover briefly, and then drift away. There is no confrontation, no display, just a brief intersection of paths. These encounters reinforce the sense that these animals are not adapted to interact with large, noisy intruders. They are adapted to a quieter reality. When thinking about prehistoric creatures potentially surviving in the deep, it is these patterns that matter most. Survival does not require dominance. It requires compatibility. A creature whose design aligns with the abyss's rules could persist unnoticed for immense spans of time. Its presence would not reshape ecosystems dramatically. It would simply continue. As exploration pushes deeper, the number of documented ancient-style predators continues to grow. Each new species described adds another piece to the puzzle. Each one reinforces the idea that the abyss is not a place of constant novelty, but a place where old solutions are still valid. The deep ocean does not reward reinvention. It rewards reliability. And in that environment, predators with prehistoric designs are not relics. They are specialists, finely tuned conditions that have changed very little since the early chapters of life's story. From here, attention naturally shifts from hunters that rely on muscle and teeth to creatures whose bodies themselves seem unchanged, whose softness and simplicity echo some of the earliest multicellular life. In the abyss, even vulnerability can be a successful strategy when paired with the right conditions. There is a tendency to associate age with hardness. Bones fossilize, shells endure, teeth survive long after flesh is gone. Because of this, prehistoric life is often imagined as armoured, spiked, plated, or otherwise reinforced. But the earliest chapters of animal life tell a different story. For most of Earth's history, life was soft, flexible, gelatinous, built not for impact but for persistence. And in the deep ocean, those early blueprints never truly went away. Soft-bodied organisms dominate the abyss in both diversity and abundance. They do not announce themselves with speed or strength. They drift, pulse, filter, absorb, and wait. Their forms are simple by surface standards, often symmetrical, often translucent, often lacking anything that could reasonably be called a skeleton. To an untrained eye, they can look unfinished or fragile. In reality, they are some of the most durable life forms on the planet, not because they resist the environment, but because they yield to it completely. In the abyss, rigidity is a liability. Hard structures crack under pressure. Gas-filled spaces collapse. Sharp edges create stress points. Soft bodies do none of this. They compress evenly. They flex. They adapt their shape moment by moment to the water around them. This quality mirrors some of the earliest multicellular organisms, which evolved before skeletons became common and before predation drove the development of armour and speed. Jellyfish are often cited as examples of evolutionary simplicity, but that simplicity is misleading. Jellyfish lineages extend back over 500 million years. Fossils from the Cambrian period show organisms nearly indistinguishable in overall form from modern species. A bell, tentacles, radial symmetry, a nerve net rather than a centralized brain, no bones, no blood, no heart. And yet, these designs have endured through every mass extinction event Earth has experienced. In shallow waters, jellyfish blooms can appear and disappear dramatically. In the deep ocean, related soft-bodied organisms exist in a quieter state, drifting slowly through darkness, rarely encountered, rarely disturbed. Comb jellies, sea anemones, siphonophores, and a wide array of gelatinous zooplankton occupy niches that require little modification over time. Their bodies do not rely on high-energy input. Their movement costs little. Their feeding strategies are passive or opportunistic. Sea cucumbers offer another example of ancient blueprints functioning perfectly in the abyss. Despite their unassuming appearance, they are among the most important animals on the deep sea floor. Moving slowly across sediment, they ingest organic matter, extract nutrients, and excrete cleaned sediment behind them. This process has likely been occurring for hundreds of millions of years, largely unchanged. Fossil echinoderms show that similar deposit feeding strategies were established early and proved effective enough to persist. What unites these organisms is not just softness, but modularity. Their bodies are not rigid machines with fixed parts. They are systems that tolerate variation. Damage is often survivable. Regeneration is common. Some can lose large portions of their bodies and continue functioning. This resilience reduces selective pressure for dramatic redesign. If a body plan can survive injury, starvation, and environmental stress without catastrophic failure, there is little reason for evolution to replace it. The abyss amplifies this effect. Predation pressure is lower than in shallow waters. Encounters are rarer. Competition is diffuse. Under these conditions, traits that would be liabilities elsewhere become strengths. Transparency makes an organism nearly invisible in darkness. Slow movement conserves energy. Chemical defenses replace physical armor. Reproduction can occur opportunistically rather than continuously. From an evolutionary standpoint, these organisms represent lineages that reached a stable solution early and then refined it only subtly. Their genomes continue to change, but their outward forms remain consistent because there is no strong pressure to alter them. This creates the illusion that evolution has stopped, when in reality it has simply shifted focus away from morphology and toward physiology and biochemistry. Pressure plays a central role here as well. Soft tissues handle compression better than rigid ones. Water-filled bodies equalize pressure naturally. There are no air spaces to collapse, no joints to snap. In the deep, softness is not weakness, it is structural integrity. Cold temperatures further reinforce this stability. Chemical reactions slow, metabolism decreases, growth becomes gradual. When organisms grow slowly and live long lives, generational turnover decreases. With fewer generations passing per unit of time, evolutionary change unfolds more slowly. Traits that persist do so not because they are perfect, but because they are sufficient. Another important factor is developmental simplicity. Many soft-bodied organisms follow relatively straightforward developmental pathways. Their embryonic stages are less constrained by complex skeletal formation. This allows for flexibility without catastrophic failure. Minor genetic variations do not necessarily result in non-viable offspring. This tolerance buffers populations against extinction and reduces the need for rapid adaptation. The fossil record supports this pattern. Soft-bodied fossils are rare because they do not preserve easily, but when conditions allow, such as in Burgess Shale-type deposits, the result is a window into early life dominated by soft forms. Many of those forms bear a striking resemblance to modern deep-sea organisms, different names, different details, but the same fundamental strategies. In the abyss, time itself behaves differently from a biological perspective. Without sunlight, there is no daily rhythm. Without seasons, there is no annual cycle. Many deep-sea organisms do not experience time as a sequence of changing conditions. They experience it as continuity. This lack of environmental punctuation reduces selective pressure for change. Evolution responds to differences. In the abyss, differences are subtle. This is why so many abyssal organisms appear timeless. Not because they are ancient individuals, but because their environments do not demand novelty. They exist in a narrow band of conditions that rarely shifts. As long as they remain within that band, survival is possible without reinvention. It is also why claims of prehistoric creatures surviving in the deep often involve soft-bodied or minimally structured animals rather than heavily armoured ones. Soft-bodied organisms leave little trace. They are difficult to detect. They decompose quickly when brought to the surface. They rarely fossilise. If an ancient lineage of gelatinous predators or filter feeders persisted in the abyss, it could do so for immense spans of time without leaving obvious evidence. Even when such organisms are observed, classification can be difficult. Without bones or shells, distinguishing between species requires careful genetic and morphological analysis. Many deep-sea soft-bodied animals are described from single specimens. Some are known only from video footage. Entire groups likely remain undescribed simply because they have never been sampled. There is also a human bias at play. We tend to focus on animals that resemble us in structure. Skeletons, faces, limbs. Soft-bodied life feels alien, less relatable, easier to overlook. In the abyss, this bias becomes a barrier to understanding. The most ancient blueprints are not dramatic. They are quiet, efficient, and unobtrusive. Evolution does not always move forward by adding complexity. Sometimes it moves sideways, refining simplicity until it becomes nearly invisible. In environments like the abyss, where survival depends more on endurance than innovation, simplicity wins repeatedly. This does not mean these organisms are unchanged in every sense. Many have developed sophisticated chemical signaling, bioluminescence, and unique metabolic pathways. These changes occur beneath the surface, invisible to casual observation. The blueprint remains old. The wiring adapts quietly. When people imagine prehistoric survivors, they often picture recognizable forms carried forward unchanged. But the deep ocean suggests a different model. Survival is not about clinging to the past. It is about finding a solution early that does not need to be replaced. Soft bodies, flexible systems, and low-energy lifestyles meet that requirement exceptionally well. As attention continues to move through the abyss, it becomes clear that not all ancient survivors announce themselves with size or teeth. Some survive by blending so completely into their environment that they become part of its background. They are not relics waiting to be discovered. They are ongoing processes, repeating quietly in the dark. And while softness preserves ancient blueprints, light, when it appears, introduces another layer of continuity. In a place without sun, organisms learned early how to create their own signals, shaping communication, hunting, and survival in ways that echo some of the oldest interactions between predator and prey. Long before eyes learned to focus, before colours separated into names, before vision became the dominant sense for navigating the world, life discovered a different way to communicate presence. It learned how to make light. Not sunlight, not reflected glow, but light generated from within living tissue itself. In the deep ocean, where darkness is not an absence but a constant condition, this ability became one of the oldest and most enduring biological languages on Earth. Bioluminescence is often described as a curiosity, a spectacle, something beautiful and strange. But in the abyss, it is neither decorative nor rare. It is fundamental. It is as old as complex life itself and possibly older. Some of the earliest multicellular organisms may have produced light long before vision evolved to interpret it. In that sense, bioluminescence did not arise as a response to sight. Sight arose as a response to light. In the deep sea, light is information. It carries meaning in a world where touch is limited. Sound travels unpredictably, and chemical signals diffuse slowly. A flash can warn, a glow can attract, a pulse can confuse. Over hundreds of millions of years, these signals became refined, standardized within lineages, and reused across evolutionary time. The result is a communication system that feels ancient because it is. The chemical basis of bioluminescence is remarkably conserved. Across vastly different species, the same basic reaction appears again and again. A molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen, catalyzed by an enzyme called luciferase, producing light with very little heat. Variations exist, but the underlying principle remains consistent. This biochemical simplicity helps explain why bioluminescence evolved multiple times independently, and why it persisted once established. In the abyss, more than 90% of animals are thought to produce light in some form. Fish, jellyfish, crustaceans, worms, and even some bacteria participate. This prevalence alone suggests that bioluminescence is not a late innovation. It is not a novelty layered onto modern ecosystems. It is an ancient solution that proved so effective it was never abandoned. Lanternfish provide a clear example. These small, unassuming fish inhabit the mesopelagic and bathypelagic zones and are among the most abundant vertebrates on Earth. Their bodies are lined with photophores, specialized light-producing organs arranged in species-specific patterns. These patterns are not random. They function as identifiers, allowing individuals to recognize members of their own species in total darkness. Fossil evidence suggests that similar light organ arrangements existed in early deep-sea fish, indicating that this system stabilized long ago. The language of light does not rely on complexity. A flash can mean danger. A steady glow can mean presence. A rhythmic pulse can mean identity. These signals do not require learning in the way human language does. They are encoded biologically. A creature responds because it is built to respond. This makes bioluminescence especially suitable for environments where encounters are rare and mistakes are costly. Anglerfish take this principle to its logical extreme. The bioluminescent lure extending from the female anglerfish's head is not merely bait. It is a refined tool shaped by deep time. The bacteria that produce the light live in symbiosis within the lure, passed from generation to generation. This partnership itself is ancient, reflecting a time when cooperation between species became as important as competition. When prey approaches the lure, it is not acting irrationally. In a dark environment, light often signals food. It may indicate a smaller organism feeding, a chemical reaction releasing energy, or a safe point of reference. The anglerfish exploits this expectation, a deception made possible only because light has carried meaning for so long. Counter-illumination represents another ancient use of bioluminescence. Many deep-sea animals produce light on their undersides to match the faint glow of the surface above, effectively erasing their silhouette when viewed from below. This strategy requires an understanding encoded in evolution of how light behaves in water. It is a precise solution to a specific problem, and it appears across unrelated groups, suggesting early origin and repeated success. The fact that such strategies are shared by distant lineages points to a deep evolutionary root. Once light became a usable signal, life found multiple ways to speak it. Some whispered, some shouted, some mimicked, some lied. But the grammar remained the same. Bioluminescence also plays a role in defense. Sudden flashes can startle predators. Clouds of glowing particles released into the water can confuse attackers, creating the illusion of multiple targets or masking escape. This behavior is seen in deep-sea shrimp and squid, whose ink or secretions glow rather than darken. This inversion of surface world logic again points to an ancient framework adapted to darkness rather than light. From a prehistoric perspective, bioluminescence offers continuity where other traits diverge. Body shapes change, sizes fluctuate, skeletons appear and disappear. But light persists. It adapts to new contexts without losing its core function. It remains a signal in the dark. This continuity matters when considering what kinds of creatures might persist unseen in the abyss. A soft-bodied organism with ancient bioluminescent signalling could exist for immense spans of time without attracting attention. Its light might be faint, infrequent, or tuned to wavelengths rarely detected by our instruments. It might communicate with its own kind in ways we cannot easily interpret or even notice. Human technology is poorly matched to this language. Most deep-sea cameras rely on bright white lights that overwhelm natural bioluminescence. Sonar detects mass, not glow. Even when bioluminescence is observed, it is often incidental, triggered by disturbance rather than natural behaviour. We see reactions, not conversations. There are rare moments, captured during low-light dives, when submersibles turn off their lights and allow the darkness to settle. In these moments, the water sometimes fills with sparks, pulses, drifting points of blue and green light. It becomes clear that the abyss is not dark in the absolute sense. It is quietly illuminated by life speaking to itself. This realization reframes the idea of prehistoric survival. A creature does not need to be large or aggressive to persist. It needs to communicate effectively within its environment. Bioluminescence provides that channel. It is efficient, it is flexible, and it does not require constant innovation. Some researchers have suggested that bioluminescence may have originated as a metabolic byproduct, a way to manage reactive oxygen species. If true, this would push its origin even deeper into the past, before it was co-opted for signalling. Evolution often repurposes existing mechanisms, and the deep ocean is full of such repurposing. What begins as waste becomes language. What begins as chemistry becomes behaviour. The abyss rewards such efficiency. Signals that cost little energy and convey essential information are favoured. Over time, these signals stabilise. They become part of the environment's background, as fundamental as pressure or cold. It is also worth noting that bioluminescence does not fossilise. It leaves no direct trace in the geological record. We infer its ancient presence indirectly, through anatomy, genetics, and chemical pathways. This absence of direct evidence mirrors the challenge of detecting soft-bodied prehistoric survivors. The traits most likely to persist are often the hardest to see. When people imagine ancient creatures hiding in the deep, they often imagine silence and stillness. But the abyss is not silent in every sense. It is visually quiet, but chemically and biologically expressive. Like flickers where life moves, signals pass between organisms without sound. This quiet exchange may have been occurring continuously, since long before humans evolved eyes capable of seeing it. Bioluminescence also blurs the line between predator and prey. A glow can attract food or attract danger. Context matters. Timing matters. In this way, light becomes a negotiation rather than a declaration. Ancient ecosystems likely relied on similar negotiations long before complex food webs formed. The persistence of bioluminescence suggests that some aspects of life's earliest communication systems remain intact. They did not need replacement. They needed only to persist in environments where their meaning remained valid. The deep ocean provided such an environment. As exploration advances, researchers are beginning to catalogue bioluminescent patterns with greater precision. New wavelengths are being detected, new chemical variants identified. Each discovery adds nuance to a language we're only beginning to understand. But even as details change, the core message remains the same. Light in the dark means something. For creatures shaped by prehistoric conditions, this language may be the key to long-term survival. It allows coordination without proximity, recognition without contact, deception without force. These advantages scale across time, not just space. When thinking about what still hides in the abyss, it is tempting to focus on what we might see if something large passed in front of a camera. But many ancient survivors would never announce themselves that way. They would communicate in brief glows, faint pulses, or slow waves of light that blend seamlessly into the background of a living ocean. Understanding the deep, then, requires learning to listen with our eyes in a different way, not for spectacle, but for pattern, not for monsters, but for meaning. And once light becomes the medium of survival, other traces of ancient life begin to appear, not as living bodies, but as remnants scattered across the ocean floor waiting to be interpreted alongside the glow that still moves above them. The deep ocean does not keep records in neat layers the way land does. There are no exposed cliffs to read, no eroding hillsides that reveal pages of history at a glance. Instead, the abyss records time quietly, particle by particle, as material drifts down from above and settles onto the seafloor. Bones sink, teeth fall, shells fracture. Over immense spans of time, these remnants accumulate, forming a scattered but persistent archive of life that once lived, hunted, fed, and died in the water column above. Unlike terrestrial fossils, which are often preserved by rapid burial after catastrophic events, deep-sea fossils are usually the result of slow processes. A shark loses a tooth. A fish dies and sinks. A whale finishes its final descent. Each event adds a small entry to the ocean's memory. Because sedimentation rates in the abyss are extremely low, sometimes only a few millimeters per 1,000 years, these remains can sit exposed on the seafloor for ages before being buried. This creates a unique situation where fossils and modern organisms coexist in the same visual field. This mixing of time is one of the most unsettling aspects of deep-sea exploration. Submersible pilots often report seeing ancient-looking bones lying on the seafloor alongside living animals, a rib cage partially embedded in sediment, vertebrae spaced like stepping stones, teeth scattered across the mud. It becomes difficult to say, at a glance, how old any of it is. Some remains may be decades old, others may be millions. Teeth in particular dominate the deep-sea fossil record. Sharks continuously shed and replace their teeth throughout their lives, sometimes losing tens of thousands over a lifetime. These teeth are composed of dense enamel that resists decay. They sink quickly and remain intact for astonishingly long periods. As a result, shark teeth are among the most common vertebrate fossils found on the ocean floor. Among these, the most famous belong to the megalodon. These massive teeth, some larger than a human hand, are found scattered across seabeds worldwide. Their size alone suggests a predator of extraordinary scale, far larger than any modern shark. For years, these teeth were found in sediments thought to be millions of years old, reinforcing the belief that the animal vanished around 3 to 4 million years ago. What complicates this picture is where some of these teeth have been found. In certain regions, megalodon teeth have been recovered from relatively young sediments, layers that appear much more recent than expected. Early interpretations sparked speculation that the species may have survived longer than assumed. Later analysis showed that ocean currents, sediment disturbance, and reworking of the seabed can relocate older fossils into younger layers, creating misleading associations. Still, the presence of such enormous teeth on the modern seafloor serves as a reminder of how incomplete our understanding of deep-sea timelines remains. The abyss does not present a clean chronological order. It presents overlap. Echoes of different eras resting side by side. Whale bones tell a similar story. When a whale dies, its body sinks rapidly, creating a whale fall that becomes an ecosystem in its own right. Over time, soft tissue is consumed, leaving behind a skeleton that can persist for decades or centuries. These bones are colonized by specialized organisms, including bone-eating worms that exist nowhere else. Eventually, even the bones degrade, but traces remain. Some whale skeletons discovered in the deep are from species that no longer exist. Ancient baleen whales, archaic toothed whales, transitional forms linking land mammals to fully aquatic life. Their remains lie far from shore, far from the places we usually associate with fossil discovery. They challenge the assumption that deep time is something found only in rock. Fish bones are rarer, as they are lighter and more fragile. But when preserved, they can reveal surprising lineages. Certain deep-sea sediment cores contain scales and vertebrae that match no known modern species. They resemble ancient groups thought to have disappeared, suggesting that relatives may persist elsewhere, or that these forms survived far longer than previously documented. Echoes also appear in chemical form. Isotopic signatures in sediments can reveal the presence of organisms long gone. Certain ratios of elements indicate feeding behaviours, metabolic pathways, and even body temperatures. These chemical fossils extend the record beyond physical remains, capturing traces of life that left no bones behind. Sound, too, becomes a kind of fossil in the deep. Whale songs recorded decades ago differ subtly from those heard today. Deep-sea hydrophones occasionally capture unexplained noises, low-frequency calls that do not match known species. While many of these sounds can be attributed to geological activity, ice movement or human machinery, some remain unidentified. They are not evidence of unknown creatures on their own, but they add to a pattern of partial information, fragments without context. The deep ocean floor also preserves tracks, not footprints in the traditional sense, but trails left by animals moving across soft sediment. These traces can persist for surprisingly long periods in the absence of currents. Some resemble fossilized trackways from ancient marine environments, winding paths that suggest slow-moving, deliberate organisms. In some cases, it is difficult to determine whether a trail was made hours ago or years ago. This ambiguity feeds speculation, but it also highlights a fundamental truth. The abyss does not erase quickly. What happens there lingers. This lingering creates the illusion that the past is closer than it is, and in some ways it truly is. In the deep, millions of years can collapse into a single visual scene. Paleontologists studying deep-sea cores often encounter sudden appearances and disappearances of species in the record. A type of microfossil becomes abundant, then vanishes. Another appears unexpectedly. These shifts may reflect real extinction events, but they may also reflect migration into deeper waters beyond sampling reach. When a species disappears from shallow sediments, it may not be gone. It may have simply moved. This possibility complicates interpretations of extinction timelines. If a lineage retreats into deeper habitats during periods of environmental stress, its fossil record may appear to end abruptly, even though the lineage continues elsewhere. Only later, if remains are found in deep sediments, does the story re-emerge. The abyss then functions as both archive and blind spot. It holds records, but accessing them is difficult. Sediment cores provide narrow vertical snapshots. Trawls sample only what they happen to collect. Submersibles observe only what passes through their field of view. The picture is always partial. This partiality leaves room for uncertainty, not in a sensational sense, but in a scientific one. When remains of ancient-looking animals are found on the modern seafloor, they force a re-evaluation of assumptions. Not that extinct creatures roam freely, but that extinction is not always synchronized across environments. Bones and teeth do not tell us what is alive now. They tell us what was present at some point. But when those remains are found in places where living fossils already exist, the boundary between past and present becomes less rigid. The deep ocean encourages continuity. It is also important to consider scale. The deep sea floor covers an area so vast that even a large animal could die and leave remains that are never encountered. For every fossil discovered, countless others remain buried or unobserved. The record we have is not representative. It is opportunistic. This is why claims about what may still exist in the abyss must be approached cautiously. Fossils alone cannot confirm survival, but they can suggest persistence. They can reveal that certain designs were viable for immense spans of time. They can show that large, ancient predators once thrived in environments similar to those that still exist today. When fossils of massive sharks, primitive fish, and archaic whales appear in deep-sea contexts, They remind us that the abyss has always supported large life. It has always been capable of sustaining predators, scavengers, and complex food webs. The disappearance of such animals from the surface does not mean the deep suddenly became inhospitable. The ocean floor is littered with echoes. Some are loud and obvious, like enormous teeth. Others are subtle, like chemical traces or faint trackways. Together they form a fragmented narrative that resists simple conclusions. It is a story told out of order, with missing pages and overlapping chapters. As exploration continues, new tools are allowing scientists to read this story with greater clarity. High-resolution mapping reveals fossil-rich areas. Improved dating techniques refine timelines. Genetic analysis links modern organisms to ancient ancestors with increasing precision. Each advance narrows uncertainty, but it does not eliminate mystery. The abyss is not a place where the past is gone. It is a place where the past settles slowly into the present. Bones rest where they fell. Teeth lie where they were shed. Echoes persist in sediment and sound. This persistence does not guarantee that prehistoric creatures still live there, but it keeps the possibility grounded in context rather than fantasy. From this quiet accumulation of evidence, attention naturally shifts toward the creatures we know still exist, the ones already confirmed as survivors, living links between deep time and now. They provide a baseline, a reminder that what once seemed impossible has already happened, quietly, without announcement, beneath the weight of the ocean. At some point, speculation has to pause and make room for confirmation. Not everything that survives from deep time does so in secrecy. Some creatures once thought lost forever have been seen, measured, named and studied, even if only briefly and imperfectly. They exist not as rumours or shadows, but as documented reminders that extinction, especially in the ocean, does not always mean what we think it means. The most famous of these survivors is the coelacanth. Its rediscovery remains one of the most humbling moments in modern biology, not because it revealed something monstrous or dramatic, but because it revealed how wrong certainty can be when applied to places we barely explore. For decades, coelacanths were known only from fossils dating back hundreds of millions of years. Their anatomy appeared primitive even by prehistoric standards. Lobed fins supported by bone, a hinged skull joint unlike that of most modern fish, a vestigial lung filled with fat. Everything about the coelacanth suggested an evolutionary experiment abandoned long ago, and yet, there it was, alive, slow-moving, unbothered, living in deep waters along steep volcanic slopes where fishing rarely reached. The coelacanth did not survive by adapting aggressively to new conditions. It survived by remaining in an environment that never demanded dramatic change. Its metabolism is low. Its movements are deliberate. It spends much of its time hovering motionless, conserving energy. It reproduces slowly and lives long lives. These traits would be disadvantages in competitive shallow waters. In the deep, they are assets. What makes the coelacanth especially important is not just its age, but its role in evolutionary understanding. It belongs to a lineage closely related to the ancestors of all land vertebrates. Its survival provides a living reference point, a chance to study traits that would otherwise exist only in stone. It reminds us that evolutionary pathways do not always end cleanly. Some branches persist quietly, while others flourish noisily. Another confirmed survivor with unmistakably ancient traits is the goblin shark. Rarely seen and poorly understood, the goblin shark inhabits deep continental slopes and submarine canyons. Its appearance often shocks those encountering it for the first time. Pale skin, flabby musculature, an elongated snout filled with electroreceptors, and jaws that shoot forward like a mechanical trap. This design is not modern in the conventional sense. Fossil sharks with similar jaw structures appear early in shark evolution. Over time, many lineages refined speed and streamlining, becoming active hunters of shallow waters. The goblin shark retained an older approach. It does not chase. It detects electrical signals from nearby prey and relies on a sudden mechanical advantage to capture it. This method requires little energy and functions well in darkness. Goblin sharks surface so rarely that most encounters involve individuals already stressed or dying from decompression. This creates a skewed impression of fragility. In their natural environment, they are likely well adapted and efficient. Their continued existence demonstrates that prehistoric hunting strategies remain viable when conditions support them. The frilled shark adds another layer to this pattern. With its eel-like body and rows of backward-pointing teeth, it looks less like a modern shark and more like a fossil illustration brought to life. Its lineage stretches back to the Jurassic period. Its hunting behaviour mirrors that ancestry. Rather than tearing prey apart, it grips and swallows, relying on its flexible body to manoeuvre in confined spaces. Frilled sharks are not abundant. They are not widespread, but they persist. Their rarity does not reflect failure. It reflects a strategy built around low density and long survival. In an environment where encounters are infrequent, being rare is not a disadvantage, it is the norm. The Nautilus offers a different kind of survival story. Its lineage once filled the oceans with spiraled shells of every size. Most of those relatives, the ammonites, vanished during mass extinction. The Nautilus endured. Its external shell, divided into chambers for buoyancy control, seems archaic compared to the internalized shells of squids and cuttlefish. But in deeper waters, where pressure is steady and predation patterns differ, this design remains functional. Nautiluses are slow. Their nervous systems are simple. Their eyesight is poor. They rely heavily on chemical cues. All of this would seem limiting in a dynamic environment. In the deep, it is sufficient. The Nautilus did not need to outcompete its relatives. It needed only to occupy a space where its limitations were not fatal. Even creatures that do not live exclusively in the abyss, like horseshoe crabs, reinforce the same principle. Their body plan has remained largely unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. While they inhabit shallow waters, their survival demonstrates that effective designs can persist through multiple mass extinctions without radical modification. Their blood chemistry, used today in medical testing, reflects biochemical pathways that evolved long before mammals existed. Together, these animals form a category of confirmed persistence. They are not hypothetical, they are not exaggerated. They exist, quietly bridging deep time and the present. Each one undermines the assumption that extinction is always total and immediate. Each one suggests that other lineages may have followed similar paths but remain undocumented. What all these survivors share is not size or habitat alone, but alignment with environments that changed slowly. Whether in deep water, isolated slopes, or ecological niches buffered from surface chaos, they found refuge not by fleeing extinction, but by stepping aside from it. Their discovery histories also share a pattern. None were found because someone was searching specifically for prehistoric survivors. They were found, incidentally. A trawl hauled something unexpected. A camera caught a glimpse. A fisherman noticed something odd. This suggests that even today, discovery depends heavily on chance. This has important implications. If known survivors were overlooked for decades or centuries despite existing near human activity, what might persist in regions far less accessible? The deep ocean remains vastly underexplored. Large areas have never been visually surveyed. Many depths are visited rarely, if at all. It is also worth noting that recognition often lags behind discovery. An unusual specimen may sit in a collection for years before being properly identified. A blurry image may be dismissed until a similar one appears. Confirmation requires repetition, and repetition in the deep is difficult. These survivors do not prove that all prehistoric creatures still exist. They do not justify belief in anything without evidence, but they recalibrate expectations. They demonstrate that ancient lineages can persist unnoticed when conditions allow. They show that evolutionary conservatism is not failure, but a valid strategy under the right constraints. They also remind us that our mental timeline of life is shaped largely by surface experience. On land, change is rapid and visible. In the deep, continuity dominates. A creature can live its entire existence without encountering anything fundamentally new. As more of these survivors are studied, patterns become clearer. Slow metabolism, low reproductive rates, energy-efficient hunting or feeding, sensory systems adapted to darkness, tolerance for pressure and cold. These traits form a template. Any organism that fits it has a chance to persist for extraordinary lengths of time. The question that naturally follows is not what has survived, but what has not yet been seen. Known survivors set boundaries on what is plausible. They tell us which kinds of designs can endure. They also highlight which designs are unlikely to persist, such as large air-breathing reptiles or animals requiring frequent surface interaction. Between what is impossible and what is confirmed lies a wide grey area, a space filled with organisms that may exist but have not yet been documented. Some may resemble known survivors closely. Others may represent branches that diverged long ago and remained isolated ever since. As we move forward, attention shifts away from confirmed examples and toward that grey area. The creatures that might exist not because they are dramatic, but because they are compatible with the abyss. The ones that do not announce themselves, do not approach light, and do not leave easy traces. Those are the ones we have not yet seen. Beyond the creatures that have been catalogued, measured, and named, there exists another category of deep-sea life that occupies a far more uncertain space. These are not confirmed species, not preserved specimens, and not lineages with clear genetic records. They are encounters, partial observations, anomalies recorded briefly before disappearing again into darkness. They form the uneasy middle ground between biology and myth, not because they are fantastical, but because they are incomplete. The deep ocean produces this uncertainty by design. It is not an environment that allows for prolonged observation. Light reaches only a short distance. Instruments are noisy and intrusive. Vehicles move slowly and follow strict mission paths. Anything encountered is seen for seconds, sometimes less, before it drifts out of view or the submersible moves on. In such conditions, certainty is difficult to achieve even when observing known animals. When the animal is unfamiliar, ambiguity becomes unavoidable. There are numerous recorded encounters where deep-sea cameras captured shapes that did not immediately correspond to known species, elongated bodies without clear fin structures, massive forms passing at the edge of illumination, objects that appear to move against currents in ways inconsistent with debris. In most cases, these recordings are archived, labelled inconclusive, and set aside. Science does not classify without sufficient evidence, but the footage remains, quietly accumulating. Sonar has contributed its own share of unanswered questions. Large acoustic targets have been detected moving through deep water at depths and speeds that do not align neatly with known animals. Some detections resolve into schools of fish or layers of plankton once examined more closely. Others remain unexplained due to limited data resolution or short observation windows. Sonar does not show shape, it shows reflection. Interpretation depends heavily on context. One of the most persistent challenges is scale. In the deep ocean, there are few reference points. A creature passing near a submersible can appear enormous simply because there is nothing familiar nearby to judge size. Conversely, something truly large may appear smaller than it is if seen at a distance. Human perception struggles in environments without horizons, shadows, or landmarks. This perceptual problem has fueled myths for centuries. Sailors described serpentine bodies longer than ships, tentacles thick as masts, eyes glowing in the dark. For a long time, these descriptions were dismissed entirely. But as confirmed animals like giant squids entered scientific record, it became clear that at least some of those descriptions were distorted observations of real organisms. The line between myth and misidentification is thin in the deep sea. A giant squid surfacing briefly could be interpreted as multiple animals. A whale entangled with squid tentacles could be remembered as a single monstrous form. A decomposing carcass could look unlike anything alive. Without repeatable observation, stories fill the gaps left by uncertainty. Modern technology has reduced but not eliminated this problem. High-definition cameras provide clearer images, but they are still constrained by darkness and distance. Autonomous vehicles can roam longer, but they do so without human judgment on board. Many recordings are reviewed long after the fact, without the ability to adjust angle or lighting. What is captured is what remains. There are also encounters reported by submersible pilots and researchers that never reach public attention. Not because they are sensational, but because they are inconclusive. A shape glimpsed at the edge of vision, a movement detected but not recorded clearly, a moment where something seemed present and then was not. These are often dismissed internally as artifacts of fatigue or equipment behaviour. Exploration at extreme depths is mentally demanding, and caution is necessary. Still, patterns emerge. Many unclassified encounters involve large, slow-moving shapes that do not react strongly to light. They appear indifferent rather than evasive. This behaviour aligns with known deep-sea animals adapted to low-energy environments. It does not align with aggressive predators or fast swimmers. Whatever these shapes represent, they appear to follow the rules of the abyss. Deep-sea myths often exaggerate aggression. The reality suggested by encounters is far more subdued. The deep does not favour confrontation, it favours avoidance and patience. A large organism has little reason to approach an unfamiliar object emitting noise and light. If anything, it would remain just outside observation range. There is also the issue of rarity. Even confirmed deep-sea species are encountered infrequently. Some have been seen only a handful of times despite decades of exploration. If an unknown species exists at similar densities, the probability of repeated encounters drops sharply. A single observation may never be followed by another. Historical myths often place unknown creatures near the surface, attacking ships or dragging sailors into the sea. This imagery reflects surface fears more than deep-sea reality. Modern unclassified encounters overwhelmingly occur at depth, far from human activity. They involve observation rather than interaction. The creatures do not pursue, they do not surface. They remain where humans rarely go. This distinction matters. It suggests that if unknown animals exist, they are not waiting to be discovered in dramatic fashion. They are simply present, operating within their ecological roles without regard for human curiosity. Some myths persist because they are repeatedly reinforced by partial evidence. The idea of enormous eel-like animals, for example, appears in folklore across cultures. Fossil records show that prehistoric oceans contained giant eel-shaped predators. Modern encounters with large oarfish, frilled sharks, or unusually sized deep-sea eels may contribute to these stories. The myth persists not because it is accurate, but because it resonates with incomplete observations. The same applies to stories of massive octopus-like creatures. Before giant squids were confirmed, such stories were dismissed. After confirmation, the tone shifted. The question became not whether such creatures exist, but how many and how large. The deep ocean has repeatedly shown that initial skepticism often gives way to reluctant acceptance once evidence accumulates. However, it is important to separate possibility from probability. Not every myth has a biological explanation. Some arise from psychological factors, misinterpretation, or cultural storytelling. The deep sea amplifies these tendencies because it resists verification. Absence of evidence persists longer there than in any other environment on Earth. Scientific caution is not denial. It is a recognition of limits. Without specimens, clear imagery, or genetic material, classification cannot proceed. This does not mean encounters are ignored. It means they are archived, contextualized, and revisited as new information becomes available. In recent years, machine learning has been applied to sonar data and video archives, revealing patterns previously overlooked. Objects once dismissed as noise are being reanalyzed. Some resolve into known species, others remain anomalous. This process is slow, but it steadily reduces uncertainty. Another factor complicating classification is that many deep-sea organisms do not resemble surface animals at all. Their proportions are unfamiliar, their movements are subtle, their tissues are translucent. A creature that does not fit preconceived categories may be overlooked or mislabeled. Classification bias shapes perception. There is also the question of behaviour under observation. Many deep-sea animals avoid light, others freeze, some may retreat vertically rather than horizontally, moving out of camera range without obvious motion. This can create the impression of disappearance rather than movement. Unclassified encounters do not imply prehistoric survivors by default, but they do indicate that the deep ocean remains incompletely known. They suggest that our current catalogues are provisional, not final. Each confirmed survivor was once an unclassified anomaly. The deep-sea myths that persist today are quieter than those of the past. They are not tales of attacks or monsters, they are questions. What moved past the camera just beyond focus? What produced that sonar return? What cast that shadow? These questions are not failures of science. They are products of an environment that resists clarity. The abyss does not reveal itself easily. It requires patience, repetition, and humility. As exploration continues, some of these mysteries will resolve into known species or natural phenomena. Others may remain unresolved for generations. A few may lead to genuine discovery. History suggests that at least some will. The important point is not to inflate uncertainty into fantasy, nor to dismiss it out of discomfort. The deep ocean occupies a scale that exceeds human intuition. In such a place, uncertainty is not an exception, it is the default. Between the creatures we have named and the myths we have inherited lies a vast region of incomplete knowledge. It is populated not by means of imagination, but by limited data. It is here that the possibility of undiscovered life persists, not because we want it to, but because the environment allows it. And as long as exploration remains partial, as long as observation windows remain brief, and as long as the abyss remains largely untouched, there will always be room for the ones we have not yet seen. Long before humans could see into the deep ocean, they could hear it. Not clearly, not comfortably, but unmistakably. Sound travels through water far more efficiently than light, and in the abyss, where darkness is complete and pressure flattens almost everything else, sound becomes the dominant carrier of information. It bends, it reflects, it travels for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. In the deep, nothing truly happens in silence. The thermocline marks one of the most important boundaries in the ocean. Above it, surface waters are warmer, mixed by wind and weather, filled with noise from waves, storms, ships, and biological activity. Below it, temperatures drop sharply, water becomes denser, and sound behaves differently. Acoustic energy can become trapped in layers, forming channels that guide sound across immense distances with surprisingly little loss. This is why submarines, whales, and listening stations pay such close attention to depth. The ocean is not just layered by temperature and pressure, but by how it carries sound. When hydrophones began listening seriously to the deep ocean in the mid-20th century, the expectation was straightforward. Most sounds would come from known sources: whales, earthquakes, ice movement, human machinery. And many did. But mixed among these familiar signatures were sounds that did not fit neatly into any category. Low-frequency calls of enormous amplitude, pulses that repeated without obvious pattern, sweeps that rose and fell in frequency in ways that seemed deliberate rather than mechanical. Some of these sounds were eventually identified. Blue whales produce some of the loudest biological sounds on Earth, low-frequency calls that can travel across ocean basins. Fin whales emit rhythmic pulses. Sperm whales click rapidly. creating acoustic signatures dense enough to resemble machinery. Once these patterns were catalogued, many mysteries resolved, others did not. One of the most unsettling aspects of deep-sea acoustics is scale. Low-frequency sounds require large sources. The physics is simple. The lower the frequency, the larger the structure needed to produce it. This is why small animals chirp and large animals boom. When hydrophones detect extremely low-frequency sounds, the immediate question is not what, but how big. In many cases, geological explanations apply. Underwater earthquakes, volcanic activity, and the movement of tectonic plates generate powerful acoustic signals. Ice cracking and shifting produces long, resonant groans. Even waves interacting with coastlines can produce deep sounds under certain conditions. Over time, scientists have learned to recognize these signatures, but recognition depends on repetition. When a sound occurs rarely, from an unexpected location, or with unusual structure, classification becomes difficult. Some recordings consist of single events, captured once and never again. Others repeat irregularly over years without clear seasonal or geological correlation. What makes these sounds particularly intriguing is not just their amplitude, but their modulation. Some exhibit frequency sweeps that resemble biological calls more than mechanical noise. They rise and fall smoothly. They repeat at intervals that do not match known geological processes. They occupy frequency ranges similar to large marine mammals, but differ in structure. Caution is essential here. The ocean is a complex acoustic environment. Sound reflects off sea floors, refracts through temperature layers, and interferes with itself. A single event can appear different depending on where it is recorded. Apparent patterns may emerge from noise. Human brains are excellent at finding structure where none exists. Still, the persistence of unidentified sounds has kept the discussion alive, not as evidence of unknown creatures, but as reminders of how incomplete our acoustic catalogue remains. Many deep-sea animals have never been recorded acoustically. Some may vocalize infrequently, others may produce sounds outside the frequency ranges we monitor most closely. There is also the matter of depth. Most known marine mammal vocalizations originate above or near the thermocline. Deep-diving species like sperm whales descend below it, but return regularly to the surface. If an organism spent most or all of its life below the thermocline, its acoustic behavior might differ significantly. Its calls might be optimized for pressure-dense water. They might be lower, longer, or less frequent. The abyss favors efficiency. Sound production costs energy. An organism adapted to long intervals between feeding might vocalize only when necessary. This could result in calls that are rare but powerful, designed to travel far rather than often. Such a strategy would be consistent with low-density populations spread across vast territories. Another complicating factor is that sound in the deep is not always produced intentionally. Movement itself can generate noise. Large bodies displacing water create low-frequency disturbances. Even slow motion, if massive enough, can register acoustically. In shallow waters, such sounds are masked by ambient noise. In the deep, they stand out. Submersible crews sometimes report hearing sounds through the hull. Not sharp noises, but vibrations. Low hums, distant pulses. These are often attributed to the vehicle itself, to water flow, or to distant seismic activity. But not all vibrations resolve cleanly. The hull becomes an amplifier, translating pressure changes into sensation. There is also the phenomenon of acoustic shadowing. Objects moving through water can distort sound fields, creating temporary regions of silence or amplification. A large organism passing through an acoustic channel could alter the soundscape in subtle ways, leaving behind patterns that suggest presence without direct detection. Deep-sea listening networks were originally designed for military purposes, detecting submarines, monitoring nuclear tests. These systems were not optimized for biological discovery. As a result, much of the data was filtered, compressed, or ignored, if it did not match expected signatures. Only later did scientists begin revisiting archives with ecological questions in mind. When they did, they found gaps. Sounds that had been logged but not analysed. Events labelled as noise without follow-up. Patterns dismissed because they did not repeat often enough to justify attention. This is not negligence, it is triage. Data volume exceeded interpretive capacity. As analytical tools improve, some of these old recordings are being re-examined. Machine learning algorithms can detect patterns humans miss. They can cluster similar sounds across years and locations. In some cases, this has led to the identification of previously unknown whale populations. In others, it has highlighted anomalies that remain unexplained. It is important to note that unexplained does not mean unexplainable. It means unresolved. The ocean has a way of revealing answers slowly, often after long delays. Many biological discoveries follow this pattern. A sound is recorded. Decades pass. A species is identified. The sound finds its source retroactively. The deep ocean also supports animals that communicate through means we barely understand. Vibrations transmitted through the seafloor. Pressure waves sensed through specialised organs, electrical signals interacting with conductive water. Our focus on audible sound may overlook other channels entirely. Prehistoric life likely relied heavily on such non-visual communication. Before complex eyes evolved, detecting movement, vibration and chemical change was paramount. The deep ocean preserves these conditions. It favours senses that function without light. Sound becomes an extension of touch. This context matters when considering the possibility of unknown deep-sea organisms. If such creatures exist, they may leave acoustic traces long before they are seen. But those traces may not resemble familiar calls. They may not follow patterns we expect. They may occur infrequently, triggered by behaviours we rarely witness. Deep-sea myths often include descriptions of sounds, groans beneath ships, rhythmic thumping, calls echoing from below. Historically, these were dismissed as imagination or fear. Modern acoustics has shown that the ocean produces a wide range of natural sounds that can feel unsettling when heard without context. At the same time, it has shown that biological sound production in the ocean is more diverse than once thought. Whales were once considered the primary sources of oceanic sound. Now we know that fish, invertebrates, and even plankton contribute. Some species produce sounds only during mating, others only during feeding, some only under stress. A creature adapted to the abyss might vocalize only rarely, perhaps to locate a mate across great distances. Such a call would be optimized for range rather than repetition. It might be loud, low, and brief, exactly the kind of signal that would be recorded once and then vanish. This does not confirm the existence of prehistoric survivors. It does not suggest monsters calling from the deep. But it reinforces a broader point. The abyss is not silent. It is active in ways we are still learning to interpret. Sound carries information from places we cannot see, from events we cannot witness directly. Listening to the deep is an act of patience. Patterns emerge slowly. Context accumulates. Some mysteries resolve. Others persist. The longer we listen, the more complex the soundscape becomes. As with bones on the seafloor and lights in the darkness, sound provides fragments rather than full pictures. It offers hints. It suggests presence. It invites caution rather than certainty. And once sound reveals that the abyss is not quiet, another question follows naturally. If communication and movement occur in darkness through vibration and pressure, how often do we miss encounters simply because our exploration tools are too intrusive, too bright, too loud to notice what moves carefully through the deep? That question leads directly to the limits of exploration itself, and to the reasons why so much of the abyss remains unseen, not because it is empty, but because we have not yet learned how to look without overwhelming what is already there. The idea that most of the deep ocean remains unexplored often sounds dramatic, But it is not an exaggeration. It is a straightforward statement of logistics, physics, and human limitation. We rarely look into the abyss not because we lack curiosity, but because every aspect of reaching it works against sustained, detailed exploration. Distance, pressure, darkness, cost, and time all combine to make the deep ocean one of the most inaccessible environments humans have ever attempted to study. Depth alone reshapes what exploration means. At several thousand meters below the surface, pressure reaches levels that destroy most materials instantly. Electronics must be sealed within thick housings, glass must be specially engineered, metals must tolerate constant compression without fatigue. Even the smallest failure becomes catastrophic. Unlike space, where pressure differences exist only at boundaries, the deep ocean applies its force continuously from every direction without pause. This means that every expedition requires custom-built equipment. There are no mass-produced deep-sea vehicles. Each submersible or remotely operated vehicle is a specialized machine, designed for a narrow range of depths and tasks. Development takes years. Costs run into the tens or hundreds of millions. Maintenance is constant, and even then, dives are limited in duration and frequency. Human-occupied vehicles are the most constrained. They require life support systems, safety redundancies, emergency ascent capabilities, and thick pressure hulls that limit visibility and maneuverability. A single dive may take hours to descend, leaving only a short window for observation before ascent must begin. Every minute at depth is expensive, every movement is deliberate. Remotely operated vehicles extend reach, but they introduce other limitations. They are tethered to surface ships by long cables that restrict movement and introduce drag. They rely on powerful lights that disturb the environment they are meant to observe. Their cameras capture only what falls within a narrow cone. They cannot wander freely. They follow pre-planned routes, chosen carefully to maximize scientific return within strict time limits. Autonomous underwater vehicles offer more freedom, but at the cost of immediacy. They collect data blindly, following programmed paths without real-time human guidance. If they encounter something unexpected, there is no one there to adjust course, change lighting, or linger. By the time data is reviewed, the moment has passed. Even with all this technology, coverage remains minimal. The deep ocean covers more than half of Earth's surface. The total area visually surveyed by submersibles is vanishingly small. It is measured in square kilometers, while the abyss spans millions. This imbalance alone explains much of what remains unknown. We are sampling pinpricks in a vast, continuous environment. Time compounds the problem. Deep-sea exploration is slow. Ships must travel long distances to reach dive sites. Weather windows are limited. Equipment failures cause delays. A single expedition may cost millions and yield only a handful of dives. Data analysis then takes months or years. Discovery unfolds gradually, often long after the expedition ends. This slowness affects not just what we see, but what we are prepared to recognize. Deep-sea biology does not lend itself to dramatic, immediate results. Most organisms encountered are unfamiliar but unremarkable by surface standards. New species are described quietly. Anomalies are noted cautiously. There is little incentive to frame uncertainty as discovery. Funding priorities also shape where we look. Exploration follows questions, and questions follow funding. Much of deep-sea research focuses on resources, climate, geology, and hazards. Biology competes with these priorities. When biology is studied, emphasis often falls on ecosystems near vents, seeps, or commercially relevant areas. Vast abyssal plains remain ignored because they are perceived as uniform and unproductive. This perception is misleading. The abyss is not empty, it is sparse. Life exists at low density, spread thinly across enormous distances. Studying such systems is difficult because encounters are infrequent. It is easier to study crowded ecosystems where patterns emerge quickly. The deep ocean resists that approach. Human senses also work against effective observation. We evolved to interpret environments filled with light, sound, and motion. The abyss offers little of any. Cameras flatten depth. Lights create artificial contrast. Motion is slow and subtle. Many deep-sea animals do not react visibly to intrusion. They drift, they pause, they withdraw gradually. Without experience, it is easy to miss what is there. Exploration tools themselves introduce bias. Bright lights attract some organisms and repel others. Noise drives some species away. Vehicles follow straight paths, while animals move unpredictably. What we see is shaped by how we look. Absence of observation does not equal absence of life. It often reflects mismatch between observer and environment. There is also a psychological barrier. The deep ocean lacks the immediate visual appeal of coral reefs or rainforests. Its beauty is understated. Its organisms often appear strange rather than charismatic. This affects public interest, which in turn affects funding and institutional support. Exploration follows attention. Historically, many major discoveries occurred by accident. The coelacanth was caught unintentionally. Giant squids were revealed through whale scars and washed-up remains. Hydrothermal vents were found while searching for something else entirely. This pattern persists because targeted exploration requires knowing what to target. In the abyss, much remains unknown. Risk further limits ambition. Deep-sea expeditions carry inherent danger. Equipment failures can strand vehicles. Weather can prevent recovery. Communication delays complicate rescue. Every dive is a calculated risk. This encourages conservative mission planning. Unnecessary deviations are avoided. Exploration becomes cautious by necessity. As a result, the deep ocean is explored unevenly. Certain regions are revisited repeatedly, while others remain untouched. Trenches near research hubs receive attention. Remote basins do not. Political boundaries, shipping routes, and logistical convenience all shape exploration patterns. Biology does not respect these boundaries, but research does. Data interpretation introduces another layer of limitation. Many observations are ambiguous. A shape passes briefly through frame. A movement occurs at the edge of detection. Without repeat observation, classification stalls. Science demands reproducibility. The deep ocean rarely offers it. This leads to a quiet accumulation of unresolved observations. Footage archived without follow-up. Samples collected but not fully analysed. Signals recorded but not matched. These are not failures. They are artifacts of scale. The environment is simply larger and slower than our methods. Technological optimism suggests that advances will eventually close these gaps. Better cameras, longer missions, smarter algorithms. All of this is true to a degree, but each advance reveals new layers of complexity. Improved resolution shows more diversity, not less. Longer missions encounter more variability, not uniformity. Understanding expands, but so does awareness of what remains unknown. There is also the question of impact. The deep ocean has remained relatively undisturbed precisely because we have rarely looked. Increased exploration brings disturbance. Lights alter behaviour. Sampling removes organisms. Mining threatens habitats. Exploration and preservation exist in tension. Looking more closely changes what is being observed. This tension forces difficult decisions. How much should we disturb in order to know? What risks are acceptable? Which questions justify intrusion? These debates slow progress, but they also prevent reckless exploitation. The deep ocean's inaccessibility has been its protection. From the perspective of prehistoric survival, these limits matter profoundly. An organism does not need to hide intentionally to remain unseen. It needs only to exist in an environment where observation is rare, brief, and biased. The abyss provides exactly that. Rarity compounds invisibility. A species with low population density may exist comfortably without ever encountering human technology. Even large organisms could evade detection simply by occupying vast territories. A single individual per 100 square kilometres would be functionally invisible. Behaviour reinforces this. Avoidance of light, preference for depth, slow movement, all reduce encounter probability. An animal adapted to minimise energy expenditure would have little reason to approach noisy, luminous objects. It would drift away, unnoticed. Human exploration also favours novelty over continuity. A creature that resembles known species may be overlooked. An ancient design persisting quietly would not trigger immediate alarm. Recognition often requires context that develops over time. Without that context, persistence looks like absence. The deep ocean challenges the assumption that exploration naturally converges on completeness. It does not. It expands understanding unevenly. It creates islands of knowledge separated by vast unknowns. Between those islands, life continues uninterrupted. Why we rarely look, then, is not a single answer. It is an accumulation of constraints: physical, economic, psychological, methodological. Each one narrows the window through which we observe. Together they ensure that large portions of the abyss remain functionally unseen. This does not mean the abyss is unknowable. It means knowledge arrives slowly and partially. It means certainty must be earned over decades. It means that absence of evidence persists far longer here than anywhere else on Earth. As exploration continues, the gap between what exists and what is observed will shrink, but it will never close entirely. The deep ocean operates on scales that exceed human lifespans, budgets, and patience. It rewards persistence, not speed. Understanding these limits reframes expectations. The question is not why we have not found everything. It is how much we can reasonably expect to find at all. Within those limits, the possibility of undiscovered life remains not because of mystery or myth, but because the environment makes discovery difficult by default. And once those limits are acknowledged, another question follows naturally, one that shifts attention from what we cannot reach to what we can infer. Not whether prehistoric creatures still exist in the abyss, but which ones plausibly could, given what we know about biology, physics, and the long, quiet continuity of life below the thermocline. Few questions ignite curiosity as quickly as the idea of dinosaurs still swimming somewhere in the deep. It taps into something old and instinctive, a hope that the past did not fully close its doors, that somewhere beyond our reach, familiar giants endure. But curiosity alone is not enough. To understand what might plausibly survive in the abyss, wonder has to be slowed down and placed beside biology, physics, and the unglamorous details of how bodies actually work. The first and most important clarification is a simple one. Dinosaurs, in the strict scientific sense, were land-dwelling animals. They breathed air, laid eggs on land, and relied on skeletal structures adapted for gravity rather than buoyancy. Even those that lived near water were not aquatic in the way whales or fish are. They could not dive deeply, regulate pressure, or extract oxygen underwater. Once this distinction is made, the question shifts naturally. Not whether dinosaurs survived, but whether prehistoric marine reptiles or other ancient ocean predators could have. During the age of dinosaurs, the oceans were already full of formidable life. Some of the most dominant predators of the time never set foot on land. Mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and other marine reptiles ruled prehistoric seas. They were not dinosaurs, but they lived alongside them and filled similar ecological roles. Large, fast, powerful hunters capable of taking down substantial prey. Of these groups, mosasaurs are often the focus of speculation. Fossil evidence shows that some species reached lengths exceeding 15 meters. They were agile, well-adapted swimmers, equipped with powerful tails, strong jaws, and teeth built for gripping slippery prey. Their skeletons suggest active hunting lifestyles, not ambush or scavenging. On the surface, this seems promising. Large, marine, predatory, ancient. But when examined through the lens of deep-sea survival, problems emerge. Mosasaurs were air-breathing reptiles. Like whales, they would have needed to surface regularly. Whales managed this because they evolved extreme oxygen storage capacity, pressure-resistant lungs, collapsible airways, and behaviours optimised for deep diving. Mosasaurs show no fossil evidence of similar adaptations. Their bone structure suggests buoyancy control suited for surface and mid-depth waters, not abyssal pressure. More importantly, mosasaurs lived in warm, shallow seas rich in prey. Their extinction coincides with major environmental collapse at the end of the Cretaceous period, when food webs dependent on sunlight were disrupted. Even if some individuals survived the initial extinction event, there is no clear pathway for them to transition into deep, cold, low-energy environments without dramatic evolutionary change. Such change would likely leave a fossil or genetic record. None has been found. Plesiosaurs present similar issues. While some had long necks and others had powerful short-necked builds, all were air-breathing reptiles with lifestyles centred on relatively shallow waters. Their flipper anatomy suggests manoeuvrability rather than deep diving. Sustained life below the thermocline would require adaptations absent from their known biology. Ichthyosaurs, often compared to dolphins in form, appear at first glance to be better candidates. Their bodies were streamlined, their tails were powerful. Some species likely dove deeply, but they too relied on air breathing, and fossil evidence indicates that their decline occurred well before the end Cretaceous extinction. Their disappearance appears gradual, not sudden, suggesting ecological replacement rather than refuge. This pattern repeats across prehistoric marine reptiles. Their designs were optimized for a specific kind of ocean, one warmer, brighter, and more productive than today's abyss. Transitioning into the deep would not have been a small adjustment. It would have required wholesale re-engineering of physiology, metabolism, and behaviour. In contrast, the lineages that have demonstrably survived into the present share a different set of traits. They either evolved directly within deep environments or gradually retreated into them as surface conditions changed. Sharks, for example, show repeated transitions between shallow and deep habitats across evolutionary time. Their cartilage skeletons tolerate pressure better than bone. Their metabolism can slow dramatically. Their sensory systems function without light. Cephalopods followed a similar path. Early shelled forms dominated shallow seas. Later, softer-bodied descendants adapted to deeper waters, sacrificing armour for flexibility. The result was not extinction, but relocation. Fish lineages show the same pattern. Many groups that vanished from shallow seas persisted in deeper zones, slowly adapting without radical redesign. Their survival was not dramatic, it was quiet. The deep ocean does not favour high-speed pursuit predators that require frequent feeding. It favours efficiency, patience, and low-energy lifestyles. Large, active marine reptiles simply do not fit this profile. Their extinction is not mysterious when examined in this context. They were specialists in an environment that no longer existed. This does not mean that large prehistoric forms could not survive in principle. It means that only certain kinds of prehistoric forms could. Those with flexible bodies, slow metabolisms, and minimal reliance on surface resources stand the best chance. When people report sightings of dinosaur-like creatures in the ocean, the explanations almost always resolve into known animals viewed without context. Oarfish, with their ribbon-like bodies, can appear serpentine and enormous. Frilled sharks resemble fossil illustrations more than modern fish. Giant squids surface rarely and briefly, leaving dramatic impressions. Whales seen from unusual angles can look unfamiliar and immense. These explanations are not dismissive. They are grounded in repeated patterns of misidentification corrected over time. History shows that when something truly new exists, evidence accumulates, remains are found, patterns emerge, independent observations converge. So far, this has not happened for marine reptiles thought extinct. Fossils stop appearing, genetic traces vanish, ecological niches close. In contrast, for known survivors, the trail never truly went cold. There were gaps, but not absences. Separating wonder from science does not require abandoning imagination. It requires refining it. The deep ocean does not need dinosaurs to be extraordinary. It already supports animals whose lineages stretch back hundreds of millions of years. It preserves designs that feel prehistoric because they are. The question then becomes more interesting, not less. If not dinosaurs, then what kinds of ancient life could plausibly persist? The answer lies not in size or ferocity, but in compatibility with the abyss. Ancient sharks, soft-bodied predators, slow-moving giants that feed infrequently, scavengers that rely on falls from above, filter feeders that drift for years, these fit the rules. They require little. They change slowly. They leave few traces. The deep ocean filters life through physics rather than fantasy. Pressure, cold, and scarcity eliminate what cannot adapt. What remains is not a museum of monsters, but a refuge for endurance. Wonder survives best when it aligns with reality. The reality of the abyss is subtle, patient, and indifferent to spectacle. If ancient life still hides there, it does so not as a roaring relic of the past, but as a quiet continuation of it. And once that distinction is made, once dinosaurs are set aside without disappointment, the final question becomes less about what survives, and more about what time itself means in a place where change moves so slowly that past and present begin to overlap. At the end of this long descent, there is no reveal waiting in the darkness, no single creature rising into view to confirm or deny every question at once. That, in many ways, is the most honest conclusion the deep ocean offers. What still sleeps beneath our feet is not a secret held in one place, but a pattern spread across pressure, time, and restraint. The abyss does not behave like the surface world. It does not reward visibility. It does not encourage encounters. It does not announce its inhabitants. It allows life to persist quietly, shaped more by physics than by drama. Pressure presses evenly. Cold slows everything. Scarcity enforces efficiency. Over time, these forces filter out anything that cannot endure long pauses between moments of change. When we ask what still hides in the deep, we're often really asking something else. We're asking how much of the past is truly gone. We're asking whether extinction is always absolute, or whether it sometimes looks that way only because we stop looking where survival remains possible. The deep ocean complicates that question, because it exists largely outside the rhythms that define life on land. Down there, days and nights do not alternate. Seasons do not mark time. Generations turn slowly. The difference between ancient and modern becomes less obvious. A body plan that emerged early and proved efficient can remain viable for millions of years without outward transformation. To us, it looks prehistoric. To the abyss, it is simply appropriate. Nothing in the deep needs to hurry. That alone separates it from the surface world. On land, speed matters. Adaptation happens quickly or not at all. Competition is constant. In the abyss, patience replaces urgency. Energy is conserved. Change happens, but it happens quietly, often internally, without reshaping the exterior. This is why confirmed survivors exist, not because they escaped extinction dramatically, but because they never had to confront the conditions that caused it elsewhere. They did not outcompete. They did not evolve aggressively. They remained where change arrived slowly, if at all. It is also why speculation persists without tipping into fantasy. The deep ocean has repeatedly shown that our assumptions about absence are unreliable. Entire lineages once thought erased have reappeared without fanfare. Not everywhere, not frequently. But enough to remind us that certainty requires access, and access remains limited. At the same time, restraint matters. Not every shadow is a survivor. Not every sound is a call. Not every fossil implies persistence. Science advances by narrowing possibilities, not expanding them without limit. The deep ocean invites humility because it resists easy answers from both sides. It does not confirm every hope. It does not validate every myth. It simply continues, indifferent to our questions. What still sleeps beneath our feet, then, is not a collection of hidden monsters. It is continuity. It is life proceeding at a pace slow enough that human history barely registers. It is systems that learned early how to survive without relying on light, speed, or abundance. It is evolution choosing endurance over innovation. If ancient creatures still persist in the abyss, they do so not as relics waiting to be rediscovered, but as participants in an ongoing present that happens to resemble the past. Their survival would not be a violation of natural law. It would be its quiet fulfillment. And if no additional prehistoric lineages remain, if everything that could survive already stands accounted for, the abyss would still be remarkable. It would still represent the longest-running stable environment on the planet, a place where life demonstrated that not all progress requires transformation. Perhaps that is the deeper takeaway. That survival does not always belong to the most advanced, the fastest, or the most complex. Sometimes it belongs to the most compatible, the ones that ask the least of their environment, the ones that learned early how to exist without demanding change. The deep ocean does not owe us revelation. It has already shown us enough to know that our picture of life is incomplete. That incompleteness is not a failure. It is an invitation to move more carefully, to observe longer, to accept that some answers unfold over centuries rather than lifetimes. Right now, somewhere far below, sediment continues to settle. Creatures continue to drift, crawl, wait, and feed. Light flickers briefly and fades, sound travels farther than sight ever could, and life continues doing what it has done since long before humans learned to ask questions about it. What still sleeps beneath our feet may never surface. It may never be named. It may never be photographed clearly or explained fully, but it does not need to be. Its existence, whether known or unknown, reminds us that Earth is older, deeper, and quieter than our stories often allow. And as you rest here, wherever you are, at whatever hour this voice happens to find you, that quiet continuity continues beneath oceans, continents, and time itself.